Game Freak must really hate Chikorita. We're rating them all and we've made it to Johto. But yeah, Chikorita really got the short end of the stick. We're rating these Pokemon based on how they do when you'd realistically be using them in a playthrough, and in the case of the Johto starters, we can be very specific since they're only usable in Johto, and Chikorita struggles. It's okay in Sprout Tower, but then is downright awful in the first and second gyms. Total opposite of Bulbasaur's early game performance. Its stats are pretty decent, and it does get some really nice support moves, but I don't think it could be more than 2 stars in battle prowess. Its availability is going to be a 4.5 since it's available for the whole game, but it does get the if you don't choose it, it's gone penalty. Chikorita is then based on a sauropod-like dinosaur with budding vegetation growing in a necklace pattern, and I honestly think that's a really nice grass starter concept, 3.5 stars. Before we get to its design, if you're excited as I am to start this next generation, drop your Johto predictions in the comments. Honestly, I think Chikorita is really cute, but its design is pretty polarizing. People either love it or hate it. It's very simple. I do think that it could have been better off with a more dino-shaped face like its evolutions, but in general, I do think that its tiny little feet and tail contrast with its huge eyes and leaf really well, 3.5 stars. So Chikorita's final score is 3.375 stars. Bayleef is one of the most underappreciated Pokemon of all time. We're rating them all, and it's actually still to this day one of my favorite middle evolutions. However, in battle, it's just okay. It's tough to figure out in Johto because you can realistically take on gyms 5 through 7 in any order. So you could have a Meganium for any, if not all of them, but it is really helpful against the scourge of Johto herself. But this isn't based purely on gym matchups, it's about this part of the game as a whole, and Bayleef is really bulky and has some pretty good support moves, but it's really not going to do much else at all outside of that and Razor Leaf, 2.5 stars. Its availability will be the same as Chikorita at 4.5 stars, and its concept, well, also is the exact same as Chikorita's, 3.5 stars. However, as I said at the start, I think Bayleef has one of, if not the best middle evolution designs. It just has the perfect mix of cute juvenile dinosaur and a formidable foe. I honestly love everything about its design. The sharp leaf it uses for offense on its head, the sprouting leaves around its neck, the little dino body. Honestly, Bayleef is peak Pokemon design, 5 stars, which brings Bayleef's final score to 3.875 stars. Meganium has to be in the running for worst starter ever. We're rating them all, and Meganium's stats are pretty solid actually. It's really bulky and has decent attacks and speed, and its move pool is okay. Sure, it has some support and some survivability, along with some pretty strong grass type attacks, but nothing to really make it stand out. Especially if you look at its matchups into the Johto Elite Four, they're just awful. Meganium probably shouldn't see any of these battles. 2.5 stars in battle prowess, and I think that might be generous. Its availability is going to remain the same as its pre-evolutions and every other starter at 4.5 stars, and its concept is also pretty much just the linear progression of this line. It takes inspiration from a few specific plants, which is cool, but nothing to warrant a change in score, 3.5 stars. As for its design, they had such an amazing starting point with Bayleef. It should be incredible, right? But what happened? Okay, all jokes aside, it's not bad by any means. It's still the same sauropod dinosaur growing plants around its neck, which are now a pretty flower. That's great, but I can't stand the antenna all of a sudden. Sure, maybe they're a reference to Beta Chikorita, but they just don't make any sense here. It was gearing up to be like a weapon of a head leaf blade thing, I don't know, but not this. So it is disappointing, but it's still a pretty and good looking Pokemon, 3.5 stars, which gives Meganium the final score of 3.5 stars. Will Cyndaquil score higher than Charmander? We're rating them all, and as many of you know, they actually have identical stats. But despite that, Cyndaquil has a much better early game performance. It clearly dominates Sprout Tower and does fine against Falkner, as well as destroying Bugsy's gym before it evolves. 65 speed and 60 special attack, even if you're just chucking out Ember, is great, along with some utility and priority. Clearly the best Johto starter for the early game, 4 stars in battle prowess. Its availability, just like every other starter, is 4.5 stars since it's available for the whole game, but if you don't choose it, it's gone. Cyndaquil is then pretty clearly based on an echidna with traits from Tenrix, which I've never heard of, and porcupines, but on fire, which turning the quills into fire is actually a pretty unique and creative idea, 4 stars. Its design then obviously portrays that really well, on top of just being downright adorable. The little hands and the happy little eyes, the contrast of colors and the fire quills, oh, but it's 3D sprite. Why? Why did you have to make Pokemon 3D? We're just gonna ignore that, 4 stars, which gives Cyndaquil 4.125 stars overall, which is well above Charmander's score. Uh-oh. Johto might actually have the best starter middle stages. We're rating them all, and Quilava is pretty solid through the early to mid game of Johto. 80 speed and special attack is really good at that point in the game, and we can be really specific with the Johto starters since they're only usable in Johto. It crushes Bugsy easily, then with either Fire Blast or Flamethrower from Goldenrod, it can be really helpful in the mid-game gyms, especially against Jasmine. Quilava isn't ever going to be game-breaking by any means, but it is going to be consistently really good, 4 stars. Its availability will of course be 4.5 stars like the rest of the starters, and its concept is also pretty much the same as Cyndaquil, being based off of tenrics or porcupines with their spines now being made of fire, which is still really awesome, 4 stars. Its design I actually think is the best in its line, which is honestly saying a lot because both Cyndaquil and Typhlosion have incredible designs of their own. It nails the almost teenage transition between Cyndaquil and Typhlosion without just making it awkward. Honestly, Johto just really nailed the middle stage starter designs, 4.5 stars, which gives Quilava a really nice final score of 4.25 stars. Do you think that's a good enough score to end up in the Johto top 5 by the end of it? Typhlosion has been the center of a lot lately, but we're rating them all, and at least in battle, Typhlosion is awesome. The fire type is just really useful in Johto. With 109 special attack and 100 speed, it will make great use of Lava Plume, Flamethrower, and Blast Burn, on top of some pretty solid TM coverage. It honestly has really favorable matchups into most of the Elite Four battles as well. I think this is at least 4 stars in battle prowess. Availability will of course be the normal starter 4.5, and its concept has nothing to do with that disgusting thing some degenerate at Game Freak wrote. They correctly chose to never put that out there, and I think we all wish it was never dragged into the light. This is a volcano badger. That's it, and that's really cool. 4 stars. Its design is simple, but still really great, as long as you pretend 3D doesn't exist. As I said, I do think Quilava is the best design in this line, and it's definitely my favorite, but Typhlosion is still easily a 4.5 star design, giving Typhlosion 4.25 stars overall, the same score as Quilava actually, but just short of Charizard. Here we go. Will Totodile score better or worse than the other Johto starters? We're rating them all, and its whole line's performance is pretty dramatically different between the originals and the remakes. 65 attack is really nice, and honestly 64 defense is surprisingly high for this little guy, but in true Gen 2 before the physical special split, Totodile's whole line was just a lot worse. But Totodile specifically actually kind of escapes it since it only has Water Gun anyway, and its early game matchups other than Sprout Tower are fine, but it's really never gonna shine in the early game of Johto. It's better than Chikorita, but worse than Cyndaquil, 3 stars. It's then obviously available for the whole game, or not at all, so 4.5 stars. Totodile is clearly just a toddler crocodile, and that's about it. Granted, having a baby croc is a fun idea for a water starter, but it is literally just an animal, 2.5 stars. Its design, however, I think did an amazing job with such a simple concept. I love the variation of contrasting colors, the exciting poses, it even has personality in 3D, which is just unheard of. It has a great mix of both mischievousness and cute. I think Totodile is easily the best design in its line, and of the Johto starters, 5 stars, landing Totodile the final score of 3.75 stars overall. Croconaw has a lot to live up to. We're rating them all, and the other 2 Johto middle stages are just incredible. As for its battle prowess though, Croconaw's stats are really nice for the early to mid game section of Johto, with high attack and pretty solid bulk. It is much worse in true Gen 2 though, with its only real moves being Special Water Gun and Bite. You're honestly better off with Headbutt. However, after the physical special split in the Johto remakes, you at least get a physical Bite along with Ice Fang, Crunch, and Slash, which is a huge improvement. It also does do really well against Morty and Jasmine Steelix, so taking into consideration the generational differences, I think 3.5 stars is fair. Availability will of course be 4.5 stars like the other starters, and Croconaw's concept, however, deviates quite a bit, now taking some pretty heavy inspiration from cavemen for some reason. Now it depends on who you ask whether it fits here or not. Maybe it's a nod to how ancient crocodilian species are, but it is without a doubt more interesting than just a baby crocodile, 3.5 stars. Its design, I do think, has a lot of character and personality similarly to Totodile, with more of that mischievous look, adding a mohawk looking head spike and the shadowy eyes. Then there's the obvious caveman aspects of the tattered animal skin looking garb, and maybe it's just me, but the tail looks like it's almost supposed to be a primitive sort of axe or club. I'm really not a huge fan of its design personally, but I can't deny that it's a really good one, 4 stars, which gives Croconaw 3.875 stars overall, the same score as Bayleef actually, interesting. Feraligatr is easily the best Gen 2 starter. We're rating them all, and its performance in battle, as we mentioned with its pre-evolutions, does vary pretty drastically between Gen 2 and 4. Its physical attack and defense are really good, but sadly in Gen 2, it just couldn't take advantage of it at all. Sure, you can give it nice coverage with Earthquake and Ice Punch, and really its 79 special attack is okay for using Surf, but as a whole it just felt muzzled. Until the physical special split in Gen 4, where it got a massive upgrade with physical Stab, Waterfall, along with Ice Fang, Agility, Crunch, Superpower, Earthquake, Brick Break, so on and so on. I don't count hidden abilities, but even without it, Feraligatr has a great matchup in Declare. It does pretty good in the E4, and it honestly crushes Lance. 4.5 stars, and if it wasn't for Gen 2, it probably would have been a 5. Availability will of course be 4.5 stars, but it does sadly drop the caveman inspiration from Croconaw and just goes back to being an alligator. It's cool for a water starter, but it's literally just an animal, 2.5 stars. As for its design, I do think that it looks great. I like the armor plating that it gains, but other than that, it doesn't really do much to stick out. Totodile has so much personality, and Croconaw was super unique, but Feraligatr is just an alligator on 2 feet. But despite that, its Gen 2 sprite was amazing and looked so menacing and dangerous, but it did just kind of get worse with every subsequent generation. Regardless, 4 stars, giving Feraligatr 3.875 stars overall, and here's a first look at our Johto top 5. Sentret is one of the most forgettable of the early route normal types. We're rating them all, and it's actually pretty awful in battle. I won't even lie to you guys, I thought this thing had like 60 speed, but no, it has 20. Why is this little squirrel ferret thing so slow? Granted, you're probably just using quick attack anyway, but its other stats are also just really bad. Sure, it evolves at level 15, but even before that, just about any other Pokemon available to you is gonna be better than Sentret. 1 star. It is surprisingly only available at all in Johto and Kalos, where it's obviously available super early in both. 5 stars for availability. Sentret is then based on a conglomeration of different mammals like flying squirrels, raccoons, and meerkats, as well as a loose connection to this legend associated with Japanese raccoon dogs, so it's not as plain as it would seem, but it's not very exciting either. 2.5 stars. Its design is fine. I like the fluffy tail and the sugar glider wings, but its face just being little dots really kind of takes away from it. It could have been so much cuter. And it's also just another Pokemon that got completely and utterly butchered by 3D. Now that doesn't affect the score at all, I'm just complaining, but either way, it's a 2.5 star design, giving Sentret the final score of 2.75 stars. Does anyone ever actually use Furret? We're rating them all, and hey, at least right when it evolves at level 15, 76 attack and 90 speed is pretty good, especially with Headbutt, it'll be really solid for a little bit. And sure, it has some nice moves for competitive play, but this is about playthroughs, and in that case, it's gonna fall off really quickly. To be fair, it can learn some absurd TMs, but its stats really will keep it from making use of them, especially since most of them are special moves like Flamethrower, Thunderbolt, and Ice Beam, which obviously aren't gonna do much coming from Furret's 35 special attack, since it'll be pretty heavily outclassed at that point. 2.5 stars in battle prowess, and I think that might be generous. Its availability, as we established with Sentret, is clearly 5 stars as an early route Pokemon. For its concept is then even less interesting than Sentret's. It's literally just a fluffy ferret with some aspects of ringtails. 2 stars. Its design isn't bad at all, but it also isn't anything special. It's a cute fluffy ferret. It is one of the very few Pokemon I think might actually look better in 3D though. There's not a whole lot else I can say about it. 2.5 stars, which gives Furret the final score of an even 3 stars overall, and that's honestly a little better than I was expecting. Hoothoot is so unique among regional birds. We're rating them all, and it's also pretty unique in battle, being a pretty specially bulky bird with nice utility access like Hypnosis and Reflect. It isn't going to do much offensively until it evolves, but it can hold its own and offer some support. Not to mention in Gen 8, where its move pool gets a massive upgrade with Confusion, Air Slash, and Echoed Voice. 2.5 stars in battle prowess. As for availability, it's obviously super early in Johto, then on the second island in Alola, and in Route 1 in Galar, so that averages out to 5 stars. Hoothoot is then obviously based on an owl, but also really interestingly takes inspiration from clocks, which is such a nice touch considering its home region introduced the day and night cycle in the games. 4 stars. And I actually think its design is super underrated. I actually had it ranked first on my regional birds video. Its adorable little round body, the clock hands for eyebrows, its stance being reminiscent of a pendulum clock. Hoothoot's design is just really good. 4 stars, which lands Hoothoot 3.875 stars overall, which is a top 5 spot for now. Oh no, you guys are not gonna like that one. Noctowl is super underrated. We're rating them all, and in battle, it's pretty decent. It has a surprising amount of bulk, especially on the special side, but its moveset and its use in battle as a whole is pretty awful in Gen 2, but it does get better in each generation after. In Gen 4, it gets Confusion much earlier and even adds Air Slash and Extra Sensory. Then in Gen 7 and 8, it just gets those moves, but way earlier and even adds Moonblast. Its mediocre stats do keep it from being too useful in the late game, but it is really good early on. 3 stars. Its availability is obviously a 5 like Hoothoot, but its concept is sadly not as interesting. It just drops the whole clock and day and night cycle thing entirely and replaces it with the wise old owl trope, which I still like and it explains all the psychic type moves, but it's definitely a downgrade. 3 stars. And I actually love Noctowl's design. It's obviously super simple and basic, it's quite literally just an owl, but I do think that it does a good job showing how efficient of predators owls really are, along with the nod to the wise old owl thing with the big bushy eyebrows. Also, this is one of the more iconic shinies, but that doesn't matter here. As much as I want to put this higher, I think 3.5 stars is fair, which gives Noctowl the final score of 3.625 stars, and actually actually knocks Meganium out of the top 5. Is Ledyba the worst regional bug? Well, we're rating them all, and in battle, boy, Ledyba is bad. In true Gen 2, it was genuinely useless. 80 special defense is nice, but 20 attack when your only real move is Comet Punch? Gross. It does at least get a slight upgrade in Gen 4 with the screens and Mach Punch, and sure, it gets Swift in Gen 7, so that will save it from being like a half a star, I suppose, 1 star. It is a version exclusive in Johto, but other than that, it's obviously available super early there, as well as in Kalos and Alola, so that averages out to 5 stars. And its concept, dude, this is literally just a ladybug. But wait, it's a specific ladybug. Yeah, no, that's a 1-star concept. And its design, well, it is the 5-star Pokemon, but you're crazy if you think this thing has a 5-star design. I was gonna say, oh hey, at least it's cute, but is it? This is just an actual ladybug, but with little fists and cartoony eyes. I think real ladybugs might actually be cuter. I'm sorry, I'm really not trying to trash all over the Johto bugs. There isn't anything inherently bad about Ledyba. It isn't off-putting or anything, it's just really boring. 2 stars, which gives Ledyba the final score of 2.25 stars, which I'm sure will have a comfy seat in the bottom 5 soon. Ledian is the perfect example of wasted potential. We're rating them all, and one of the first reasons that is just how bad it is in battle. Its stats are obviously awful other than special defense and speed, but the real kicker is the fact that it doesn't learn any moves even worth mentioning other than maybe Silverwind, all the way until Gen 7, where it at least gets Bug Buzz and Air Slash, but at the point in the game where Ledian is heavily outmatched. It can learn the elemental punches in Gen 2, which is cool, but they aren't going to do much of anything with 55 special attack. You guys let me know if I'm missing something here, but I don't know how this is anything higher than a 1 star in battle prowess. Thankfully, its availability is a 5 because I really do like Ledian. Its concept is where I feel like the wasted potential really comes from. Ledian being this alien or even superhero-esque punching ladybug is such an amazing idea that they just squandered. It should have been the bug fighting type, and Ariados should have been the bug dark counterpart, and it could have been this incredible story of good and evil on the early routes and the bugs fighting. So even though they didn't do anything with it, the concept is still 4 stars. Its design then really pushes my point home further. It looks like a brave young superhero ladybug going to face down the bad guys and deliver justice with its mask and goggles and little boxing gloves. I'm so mad they never did anything with this little guy. 4 stars, which does land Ledian with a decent final score of 3.5 stars. Spinarak is up next as we rate them all, and its stats aren't as bad as I thought. 60 attack in the early game is surprisingly good, but in Gen 2, its moveset is basically useless. Then it doesn't even get much better in Gen 4 outside of Shadow Sneak, but hey, in Gen 7 they buffed Leech Life, now it has 80 base power, but they took it away from Spinarak other than TMs. They really did Spinarak so dirty. 1 star. It's then a version exclusive in Johto, but otherwise super early there and Alola, but you can actually get Ariados in Victory Road and X and Y, which means it is available before the post game, and that's really gonna hurt its average, bringing it down to 3.5 stars. It's then pretty obviously based on a spider. Sure, it's a mix of a few different spiders, but it's a spider. 1 star. Its design is at least kind of cute, which to be fair is an impressive feat for a spider Pokemon. The thoughtless eyes coupled with the face on its back do look good, but we have to be honest with ourselves here. It's just a weird little spider. It's really not all that appealing or interesting. 2 stars, which gives Spinarak 1.875 stars overall, and the lowest spot on the new bottom 5, along with one of the lowest scores we've ever had. Ariados, similarly to Ledian, has so much wasted potential. We're rating them all, and it's at least usable in battle. It does have 90 attack, but the 40 speed is really gonna hold it back. Especially in true Gen 2, it just doesn't get a single useful move until you get Sludge Bomb TM in Mahogany. In Gen 4, it does get Shadow Sneak and Sucker Punch to get around its speed stat, and in Gen 7, it actually gets some decent moves like Poison Jab, X-Scissor, and a buffed Leech Life, but its stats obviously are gonna hold it back to about 2.5 stars. Its availability will stay the same as Spinarak at 3.5 stars, being that low thanks to Kalos, and its concept, as much as I'd like to ship it as the villain to Ledian's hero, it's sadly not that interesting. It's more similar to Spinarak, shocking I know, being based on a conglomeration of different spiders, like orb weavers and some horned tarantulas. This feels so wrong because in my headcanon this should have been bug dark and Ledian should have been bug fighting, and I will die on that hill. 1 star. Its design, however, I do really like. I think it's super underrated. The clearly dangerous horn and fangs with the don't with me pose and the darker contrasting colors, while also not looking explicitly like a spider. I thought it was more of a wasp when I was a kid. I think Ariados is awesome. 4 stars, giving Ariados the final score of 2.75 stars and sadly a spot on the bottom 5. Crobat has been one of the more popular top 5 predictions. We're rating them all, and let's see. Its stats aren't amazing other than its speed, but 90 in attack and 80s in defenses and HP really gives you a reliable and well-rounded Pokemon, on top of its poison flying type just being a nice defensive typing. It was okay back in Gen 2. Its moveset was pretty limited to Bite, Fly, and Confuse Ray, but it just got better and better with each generation. Fast forward to the 3D generations, and it actually has a really diverse and useful move pool. Crobat may never be the strongest member of your team, but it's honestly one of the most reliable and consistently good Pokemon across the generations. 4 stars. Its availability starts at Zubat's 5, which still feels low, but it is a friendship evolution, which a lot of you have asked if that's going to be a penalty, but if anything, that would probably get it a boost. Is it mildly annoying? Sure, but it also means you get this much stronger Pokemon with nothing in the way other than time. 5 stars. Crobat, similarly to its pre-evolutions, is based off of the stereotypes of vampires and bats, then smushed together to make this cool poison flying type Pokemon. They both got 3 stars for concept, so no different for Crobat. 3 stars. Its design is really awesome. One of my favorite Johto Pokemon without a doubt. The only thing that I don't like is the weirdly human teeth all of a sudden, but oh well, even with that, it's a fantastic design. I can't even point to why other than the fact that it's so clear that this is a super fast poison flying type. It gets the point across. 4.5 stars, which lands Crobat the final score of 4.125 stars and a spot in the top 5. I'm honestly shocked Chinchou is this early into the Johto decks. We're rating them all, and its main selling point in battle is its ability Volt Absorb, which is such a nice trick to have up your sleeve, especially considering its high HP, decent special defense, special attack, and speed, coupled with it learning Confuse Ray, Thunder Wave, and Surf. And that just gets better and better throughout the generations, adding really solid moves like Volt Switch and Charge Beam. And you really have yourself a solid all-around Pokemon in the early to mid-game. 4 stars. Its availability ranges pretty heavily between being available before the 4th gym in Johto, but then after the 7th in Hoenn, and pretty early in the rest, so that averages out to 4 stars. Chinchou is, however, just based on an anglerfish or the football fish, which is obviously just an animal, but taking the animal's bioluminescence and turning that into electricity for an electric type Pokemon is such a cool idea. 3 stars. Then its design I do like quite a bit. It turns a horrifying animal into a cutesy little light bulb fish. It's super unique, it's adorable. I don't think it's quite a top tier design, but it is good. 3.5 stars, which lands Chinchou the final score of 3.625 stars, just enough to squeak it into the top 5. Lanturn is such a lovable Pokemon, we're rating them all, and in battle it's really solid for all the same reasons as Chinchou. Volt Absorb is an amazing ability, and its stats are really good, but admittedly aren't great for the late game. Its move pool, however, is. Even in Gen 2, T-Wave, Confuse Ray, Surf, Thunder is solid. Then fast forward to Gen 7 and 8, and it adds on Signal Beam, Discharge, Aqua Ring, Scald, Volt Switch, Ice Beam, Dazzling Gleam, so on and so forth. Lanturn has such a useful and diverse move pool. I'll admit I'm a bit on the fence about this one due to its lower stats, but I think that its ability plus its move pool will make up for that, so I'll keep it 4 stars. Its availability will also be 4 stars, but unlike Chinchou, it actually has some mythological ties to Apollo, the Greek god of light whose signature animal was a dolphin. But I do think that that's a loose connection because it's not really a dolphin. 3.5 stars. And Lanturn's design, as I said at the start, is just so lovable, once again turning such a horrid creature into this adorable and happy little fish just excited to light up the sea is such an awesome direction, and it looks great. 4 stars, which gives Lanturn the final score of 3.875 stars and a spot in the top 5. The baby Pokemon are up next. Which one do you think is going to do the best? I'll never forgive Pichu of robbing us of Gorochu. We're rating them all, and Pichu, along with most baby Pokemon, is going to be a tough one to judge. In battle, it's obviously going to be horrible. I mean, look at that defense and HP. But there are 2 counterpoints to that for baby Pokemon. One, at least for Pichu, it's a friendship evolution, so you technically don't ever have to use it in battle at all. And 2, at least as far as I can fact check, every baby Pokemon has 3 perfect IVs. Now, I know I haven't talked about EVs or IVs in this series at all because it just gets super convoluted, but I think that it is at least worth mentioning here. And for the sake of this series, I feel like we do have to pretend that you're actually going to use this thing in battle, and in that case, I mean, come on, 1 star. Availability is also weird. I'm not counting the chance of the odd egg hatch in Johto, but you can catch a Pikachu and breed for one after the 2nd gym in Kanto, before the 6th in Hoenn, then before the 2nd in Kalos and Galar. Then you can also just straight up catch Pichu in the wild before the 5th gym in Sinnoh and on Route 1 in Alola, which then all averages out to 4.5 stars, the same as Pikachu, which would have saved me a lot of time. And well, its concept is also basically the same as Pikachu. It's an electric rodent, but now a baby, which is fine. I still wish we got Gorochu instead. 3 stars. Its design, however, is actually really cute. Honestly, kind of top tier cute Pokemon. They really nailed the concept of what if Pikachu was a smaller, cute baby. Just look at this thing's little face. Pichu is nowhere near my list of top favorite Pokemon, but like I said, it nailed the concept and is one of the cuter Pokemon out there. 5 stars. Which lands Pichu the final score of 3.375 stars. Why does Cleffa exist? Of all the options for who to give a baby Pokemon to, we're rating them all, and obviously Cleffa isn't gonna do well in battle. Its stats are clearly not great. Its special stats aren't horrible for the early game, and as we discussed with Pichu, with it being a friendship evolution, you don't technically ever have to actually use this thing in battle at all. And hey, if the 3 perfect IVs thing is true, that's nice, and I guess it does have some support options, but I don't know, I feel like giving it anything over a 1 star would be disingenuous. Once again, availability is rather complicated. You can catch a Clefairy and breed for one after the 2nd gym in Kanto and before the 4th gym in Galar. But you can also just catch Cleffa in the wild before the 3rd gym in Sinnoh and on Mount Hokulani in Alola, which all averages out to 4 stars. Clefairy got 4 stars in its concept for being based off of, well, fairies, but also having some references to being extraterrestrial, like being star-shaped, as well as some links to the moon rabbit. And Cleffa is, well, pretty much the exact same thing, but a baby, 4 stars. Cleffa's design, however, is fine, I suppose. It isn't nearly as cute as I think they were aiming for. It looks more like a fancy little strawberry pastry or something than a baby Clefairy. It's not a bad looking Pokemon. I suppose it is objectively cute, but not very. I think Cleffa is super underwhelming and frankly forgettable. 2 stars. Giving Cleffa the final score of 2.75 stars and a spot on our Johto bottom 5. And there I fixed the stars, my bad. I trashed all over Jiggly and Wigglytuff, but Igglybuff is actually my favorite of the line. We're rating them all, and obviously in battle, it's pretty useless. Sure, it's got nice HP, but with those defenses, attacks, and speed, it's not going to be doing anything other than attempting inaccurate sings and sweet kisses. It's another friendship evolution, so you'll probably never actually use it in battle, but for the sake of this series, if you ever did, it's obviously 1 star. I did get something wrong in the Pichu and Cleffa videos. You can't breed for the baby Pokemon or any Pokemon until after the post game in Fire Red and Leaf Green, so that's my bad, but it actually didn't end up changing the average scores at all. And with that being said, Igglybuff's availability is just as complicated as the others. You can actually only catch Igglybuff in the wild in Alola right away on the second island, also Paldea, but we're not counting that, so otherwise you have to catch Jigglybuff and then breed for it. And in that case, the earliest you can get it is before the 3rd gym in Johto and Hoenn, but not until before the 8th gym in Kalos, which will bring down its average score to 4 stars. But if you remember, Jiggly and Wigglytuff both got 1 star in concept for just being pink balls that float, sing, slap people, and having phallic hairstyles, but you guys were really not happy about that. And Igglybuff is the same thing, but oh baby, 1 star. Its design, however, I actually think is by far the best of its line. It's actually really cute. I know I said I wouldn't show the polls anymore because they're just for fun and you guys vote 5 stars for literally everything, but you guys actually voted this thing into the dirt. I'm so proud of you. But hilariously, I think it was actually too low of a score for once. Sure, it's not fantastic by any means. I still have the same complaints for it as I do the evolutions, but it is without a doubt cuter. 2.5 stars, landing Igglybuff the final score of 2.125 stars in the second lowest spot on our Johto bottom 5. Is Togepi the cutest Pokemon of all time? We're rating them all, and in battle, similarly to the other baby Pokemon, it's obviously not good. But it is definitely better. It has enough bulk to make up for its lack of speed in the early game, and its 40 special attack is okay. Granted, with it being a friendship evolution, you basically shouldn't ever send it into battle, especially in Gen 2 and 4, where its moveset is more or less just Charm, Metronome, and later on Yawn. But in Gen 8, you get the wonderful combo of Ancient Power and Serene Grace, which is actually really awesome and a lot of fun. But even with that, we have to be honest here, I think it's 2 stars at most. Thankfully, its availability is more straightforward than the other babies. You can obviously get it before the 1st gym in Johto, then the 2nd in Sinnoh, and the 3rd in Galar, which averages out to 5 stars. Then Togepi is pretty obviously based on a hatchling emerging from an egg, but with the twist that it's also the egg. Even its evolutions, which are more similar to birds, they're also still super egg, and I think that's really creative and pretty fun. Then you top that off with Togepi getting inspiration from a mythological goblin of luck, and you've got yourself a 5-star concept. As for its design, as I said at the start, it might be the cutest Pokemon of all time. It's gotta be up there. Even if it isn't number 1, it's clearly in the running. Its adorable little face popping up from the red, white, and blue egg, the cute little arms and legs. I'm normally not a huge fan of the cute Pokemon. I'm boring and like my Pokemon to be cool and edgy, but Togepi is still easily a 5-star design, which gives Togepi the final score of 4.25 stars, tying for the number 1 spot on our Johto top 5 so far. Is it Togetic? Togetic? Either way, we're rating them all, and in battle, it's actually pretty decent. Its 80s in defense and special attack, along with 105 special defense, are really solid, considering you could technically have this thing by like the 2nd gym. I actually used it on my last stream playthrough, and well, in Gen 4, its moveset is pretty bad. All I really ever used was Extra Sensory to crush Team Rocket. Other than that, it was pretty good, until towards the end of the game where it really just got outclassed and got replaced. It does get the Fairy typing post Gen 6, along with, of course, Serene Grace, Ancient Power, but it also has a very diverse TM pool to really make use of the bonus chance for burns and paras and special defense drops, etc. So I think it comes out to about 3.5 stars in battle prowess. Togepi's availability was a 5, and Togetic being a friendship evolution is gonna stay the same at 5 stars. Togetic's concept is also the same as Togepi's, the hatchling evolving into a bird-like creature while also just kind of actually being the egg, which is fantastic, 5 stars. Its design, however, I think is easily the worst in its line, but that's honestly not saying much because they're all awesome. This thing never looked like a final evolution to me. It it definitely fits better as an awkward in-between middle stage with its stubby body and long neck. It's still really cute, but not nearly as cute as Togepi, and still looks cool, but not nearly as cool as Togekiss. So it's not great or amazing in any category, but it is really good, 3.5 stars, which gives Togetic the final score of 4.25 stars, the same as Togepi actually, and another tie for first place. Oh look, another baby Pokemon! Oh, it isn't? Alright, we're rating them all, and Natu is honestly way better than I thought it was. 70 special attack and speed would be really good for an early game Pokemon, but too bad it really isn't. Its Psychic Flying typing is really nice offensively, but not the best defensively. In most regions you'll only have to use it for a few levels before it evolves, which is great, because in Gen 2 its moveset is actually pitiful. In Gen 4 it's still really bad, and even in Gen 7 and 8 it's just not good at all. It never gets a single good attacking move throughout the generations to take advantage of its decent stats. What a shame. 1.5 stars. It is available in the Ruins of Alpha and Johto, but you can't actually access that until after you get Surf. Then it's not available until the Safari Zone in Hoenn or the end of the second island in Alola. It is available in the first section of the wild area in Galar though, so that will help its average barely up to 4 stars. Natu is the tiny bird Pokemon, literally, and seems to be based on the Quetzal bird, which is boring on its own, but it is a nice hint to its evolution's pretty clear Native American inspiration, 2.5 stars. Its design is so simple yet effective. It's an adorable little ball of a bird, yet it clearly has some sort of mystical or psychic energy to it. It's still just a tiny bird, and it's not too cute, cool, or fancy, but it is good. I do think this is one of the Pokemon that actually does look better in 3D though, 3 stars, which lands Natu the final score of 2.75 stars, and sadly a spot in the bottom 5. Xatu is such an interesting Pokemon, we're rating them all, and in battle it's surprisingly good for a playthrough, or at least it could have been. 95 speed and special attack coupled with balanced stats to otherwise is really solid for when it evolves right at level 25. It will obviously fall off towards the end of the game, but it's never going to be useless, other than in Gen 2 where its moveset is quite literally useless, other than Confuseray at the same level as the champion's ace. That is just atrocious. It does get a little better in Gen 4 with Confuseray and Tailwind early, but it's still horrible. Then finally in Gen 7 it's actually pretty awesome, learning Air Slash upon evolution, then Wish and Psychic shortly after, along with some pretty solid TMs. So it's like maybe a 1 in the early gens, and then probably about 3.5 in Gen 7 and 8, so we'll give it 2.5 stars in battle prowess. Its availability will be the same as Natu's at 4 stars, and its concept is really cool. It's based on the resplendent Quetzal bird, but with clear inspiration from Mesoamerican cultures and totems, especially sun gazing from the Aztecs and the Mayans, which was believed to give you psychic powers, which makes a really interesting and fun idea for a psychic bird, 4 stars. Its design does do a really good job of portraying those ideas really clearly with the different patterns and markings. Just like Natu, it admittedly does look way better in 3D though, shockingly. But as a whole, I feel like it's always been a fairly unappealing design and always felt a little busy and lopsided to me, 3 stars. So that all gives Xatu the final score of 3.375 stars. Mareep, the best evolutionary line in Johto, is here. We're rating them all, and in battle it's so good. Sure, its stats aren't shocking, but its 65 special attack and 55 HP are more than enough for the early game. Couple that with its ability Static, which has the chance to paralyze on contact on top of both Thunder Wave and Thunder Shock. It's really good for a Johto playthrough specifically, obviously crushing Falconer and Bugsy if it hasn't evolved yet. It isn't as dominant in other regions, but remember, we're judging this on how it would do when you would realistically be using it, and in that case it is at least 4 stars in battle prowess. As for availability, you can get it super early in most regions, before the first gym in Johto and Unova, but not until after the 3rd gym in Kalos, and pretty much right away on the 2nd island in Alola, which means it shockingly isn't a 5 star in availability, it averages out to 4.5 stars. Mareep is obviously based on a sheep, but the fact that sheep's wool does build up static electricity and then turning that into an electric type sheep makes perfect sense. It also takes inspiration from the Golden Fleece from Greek mythology, and obviously concept and design are subjective, but for me personally, this is the perfect formula for Pokemon concept. Take an animal, add a fantastical trait, and a reference to some sort of folklore, mythology, or something interesting, and you've got a 5-star concept. Oh, and you guys were definitely right, I should have given Xatu 5 stars for, well, pretty much those exact same reasons. So it'll be updated in the docs. Its design then does portray that concept really well. Mareep is obviously adorable, the fluffy golden wool with the, I don't know what it's called, not a Tesla coil, but you know what I mean, the tail that clearly shows it's an electric type. It does have a really nice shiny too, but that doesn't matter here. I love Mareep, but I don't think that it's quite a top tier design. 4 stars. So that gives Mareep 4.375 stars overall, and the new highest score in Johto, sitting pretty on top of the top 5. Will Flaffy join Mareep in the top 5? We're rating them all, and Flaffy is really good in battle for all the same reasons as Mareep. Great special attack for the early game and respectable bulk on top of its static ability. It will do great against Bugsy's Scyther, and it may not handle Whitney's Miltank by itself, but between Static and Thunder Wave, you are all but guaranteed to get a paralysis off, while hitting really hard with Thunder from the department store. This isn't just about Johto though, it also does really well in Gens 5, 6, and 7. My only complaint is that it doesn't really add anything, and it will definitely start to be not as dominant all the way to level 30 as Mareep was early on. 3.5 stars in battle prowess. Its availability will stay the same as Mareep's at 4.5 stars, as well as its concept being the same. Like I said, in my opinion, this is the perfect formula for Pokemon concept. Animal plus fantastical trait plus some sort of mythological reference. 5 stars. Its design is actually my favorite in the line. It keeps everything that makes Mareep work with the whatever electrical coil tail, but it's also just the perfect middle stage between the fluffy Mareep and the cleanly sheared Ampharos, even throwing on the pink skin like a freshly sheared sheep. Its shiny is definitely worse, but I think that Flaffy is honestly just about a perfect middle stage design. 4.5 stars, which actually gives Flaffy 4.375 stars overall, tying Mareep for the new Johto high score. Ampharos may not be the next perfect 5-star Pokemon, but will it be the best in Johto? A lot of you seem to think so. We're reading them all, and in battle, Ampharos has to be the most reliable Pokemon for a Johto playthrough. Its stats are really solid, with 110 special attack, and its bulk makes up for its lack of speed. It of course still has the Static and Thunder Wave for support, but more importantly, it adds some much needed offense. Pre-Gen 4, Thunder Punch was special, and in Gen 2 it even got Fire Punch, but then as the generations go on, it just keeps getting better. Adding moves like Discharge, Dragon Pulse, Power Gem, Signal Beam, and solid TMs like Thunderbolt and Volt Switch. I won't lie, I'm on the fence about this one. I think that it's consistently going to be one of your best Pokemon throughout the generations, but it's never really dominant, so I think 4.5 stars in Battle Prowess is more fair. Its availability will be the same as Mareep's at 4.5 stars, and its concept, as we discussed with its pre-evolutions, is fantastic. Its line as a whole has a nice progression from fluffy sheep to sheared sheep, who uses its wool's static for electricity, but then with Ampharos it reaches its pinnacle. And as many of you pointed out, it also takes inspiration from this sci-fi novel, so that's going to be 5 stars. Its design I was actually quite critical of when I was a kid, until I realized the whole shearing of the sheep progression idea. But now that you take that on top of, what's it called, the Van de Graaff generator orbs, whatever, it's awesome. Also, now it kind of looks like a lighthouse with the stripes and such, which is a really nice touch. I love this design, and I think the whole line is just incredibly designed. 5 stars, which gives Ampharos 4.75 stars overall, the clear best Johto Pokemon so far, and actually the only one that would have even cracked the Kanto top 5. Mega Ampharos is definitely one of the weirdest Mega evolutions, so let's see how it does as we rate them all. In battle, it's obviously incredible. 165 special attack is just nuts, along with its solid bulk, and as we talked about with Ampharos, great move pool with damage, support, and coverage. Easily 5 stars in battle prowess. Availability for Megas is weird. I take the original Pokemon score, then I either add or subtract from it depending on when the Mega is available compared to other Megas. In Mega Ampharos, you can actually get pretty much right after getting the Mega Ring in Kalos, but a little later in Hoenn, so I think that'll stay the same at 4.5 stars. Mega Ampharos' concept, however, is odd for sure. According to some dex entries, the Mega Energy stimulated and awoke its long-sleeping dragon blood. But why does it have dragon blood? Unless I'm missing some sort of cultural reference here, that's just out of nowhere, and is going to bring down its concept from a 5 to a 4. Then its design just feels out of place in its line. Like, yeah, I spent my whole evolution line shearing the wool and becoming a more powerful sheep, but oh look, the wool is back again. I have flowing locks and a soft serve ice cream tail. I love Ampharos, it's one of my favorite Pokemon, but what were they doing with this Mega? Don't get me wrong, it's still Ampharos, it's still cool, just definitely takes a step back. 3 stars, which gives Mega Ampharos 4.125 stars, just squeezing into the Mega top 5. Bellossom is one of the more forgotten Gen 2 Pokemon, but we're rating them all and it's actually surprisingly good. Its 90 special attack, 95 defense, and 100 special defense are great, and even its 50 speed isn't bad at all if you take advantage of its chlorophyll ability, which of course doubles your speed in the sun. Granted, abilities weren't a thing in true Gen 2, and in that case Bellossom was fine. It was solid, but nothing special, but in the newer gens, especially with Sunny Day, Solar Beam, Quiver Dance, and Moonlight, some really strong TMs, along with all of the support moves you can get from Oddish, and Bellossom can be an absolute monster. If it wasn't for the earlier gens holding it back, it would be higher, but 4 stars for battle prowess. Oddish got 5 stars in availability, and with how early you can get a Sunstone in most games, it'll stay 5 stars. Its concept does kind of lose me, however. If it was a standalone Pokemon, a hula dancer plant that could be found dancing in the sun after rainfall and all of that is a really interesting idea. But as an evolution to Gloom, I just don't get it. I don't see the connection here. 3 stars. Its design is pretty good though. It's a simple, happy little hula flower. It's cute. I do like the detail of throwing in the whatever part of the Rafflesia flower in there, like Vileplume. That was a really nice touch, but other than that, it feels completely disconnected from its line. 3.5 stars, which gives Bellossom 3.875 stars, which for now is in the top 5, but man, that's going to be a big cut soon. Marill might have actually had more drastic changes than any other Pokemon. We're rating them all, and in Gen 2 it was actually just really bad. Sure, it was bulky, but 20s in attack and special attack, that's horrible. Maybe you could stay alive long enough to stack up rollouts, but still. Then in Gen 3, it got the huge power ability, which doubles its attack, which is huge of course, but its stab water moves were still special, so it was still bad. Then in Gen 4, it got another huge buff with the physical special split. Granted, it doesn't really get any moves to take advantage of that until it evolves, but still. And then finally in Gen 6, it gets the Fairy type, which is arguably the best type in the game, especially paired with water. So with all that being said, I think Marill will average out to 2.5 stars in battle prowess. As for availability, you can't get until after the 3rd gym in Johto, except for Crystal, where it's pretty much immediate. Then that exact same story for Hoenn actually, actually, with it being earlier in Emerald. Then it's before the 4th gym in Sinnoh, and super early in Unova and Kalos, which will all average out to 4.5 stars. Marill's concept, at least the popular fan theory, is that it was the first of many Pika clones, and I agree with this comment. I wish they would have kept the idea of different types, but anyway, it's based on a mouse, or more specifically, water rats, while also taking inspiration from beach balls and even water molecules. I like it. 3.5 stars. I think Marill's design is really well done though. It's just so adorable, where you can see it's kind of supposed to be a mouse, but clearly it's more creative, and it really leans into the beach ball or water buoy idea. It's a good, cute design. 4 stars, which gives Marill the final score of 3.625 stars overall. Azumarill is such an underrated Pokemon. We're rating them all, and as we went over with Marill, its performance in battle is drastically different throughout the generations. Considering it evolves at level 18, it's super bulky with 100 HP and 80s in defense. In Gen 2, its 50 attack and 60 special attack are really bad, but it just gets exponentially better with each generation. Huge power in Gen 3, physical stab moves in Gen 4, then the fairy type in Gen 6. I've actually used Azumarill in a few different Nuzlocke on my channel, and it's always surprisingly good. Its moveset in Gen 2 and 3 are really bad and hold it back, but even in Gen 4, I just used Waterfall, Ice Beam, Surf, and Strength, and it was honestly awesome. But in Gen 6, you add moves like Superpower, Play Rough, Bulldoze, Power Up Punch, Brick Rake, and it honestly might even be pushing 5 stars. So with all that in mind, I do think that it's going to end up averaging out to 3.5 stars, even though that does feel bad. Marill's availability was 4.5 stars, but I think similarly to Nidoking and Queen, being able to get this beast of a fully evolved Pokemon before the second gym is nuts and deserves a boost in score. 5 stars. Its concept is then really similar to Marill's, but goes from Beach Ball Water Mouse to Water Buoy Swamp Rabbit, and maybe even some hints at the Easter Bunny or the Moon Rabbit, hence the fairy type, which is cool. 4 stars. Its design, however, I do think is a downgrade from Marill. It isn't bad by any means, it still looks really good and fits as a great evolution, but it's definitely not nearly as cute. It's pretty good. 3.5 stars, which lands Azumarill 4 stars overall and finally kicks out the mob of 3.875 star Pokemon from the top 5. Sudowoodo is somehow super iconic yet totally forgettable at the same time. We're rating them all, and its stats are at least pretty solid with 100 attack and 115 defense. Even its special defense isn't as bad as most rock types. I'll admit I don't think I've ever actually used it, but even back in Gen 2 with Low Kick, Rock Slide, and either Dig or Earthquake, it was respectable. Then it actually becomes pretty awesome in the later generations with moves like Hammer Arm, Stone Edge, Wood Hammer, Sucker Punch, and even Head Smash with its Rock Head ability nullifying the recoil, and even some awesome TM coverage to boot. I am kind of flying blind here, but Sudowoodo seems kind of awesome. I actually really want to use it now, but I think its speed and special defense will keep it from being too high. 3.5 stars. Its availability is all over the place. You can just catch it before the 4th gym in Johto, after the 5th gym as a version exclusive in Sinnoh, then not until right before the 8th gym in Kalos, but on Route 1 in Alola and on the 2nd island in Ultra Alola, then finally after the 3rd gym in Galar, so that all ends up at 3.5 stars. Sudowoodo's concept is definitely its strongest point. I think it's one of the better ideas from Gen 2. It's based on petrified or fossilized wood, and its name literally just means fake wood, which plays right into every childhood first encounter with this thing. I know we all sent out our Quilava or Pidgeotto and we're just so confused. A mimic rock disguised as a tree. It's a simple but really solid concept. 5 stars. Its design, however, I think fell a little too far from the tree. I think it looks more like one of those stick insects with Ditto's face slapped on it than a tree, but I know that's an overreaction. I'm not saying it's a bad design by any means. It does portray the concept well, and normally I'm a proponent of simplicity in design, but I feel like Sudowoodo is just too plain and boring. 3.5 stars. And oh no, that means it's another 3.875 star Johto Pokemon. How do I keep doing this? The return of the trait evolution. Oh boy, we're rating them all, and Politoed is okay in battle. Its stats are pretty balanced and decent, and it can hit hard enough, and can take a few hits. Plus, Water Absorb is a really nice ability to have. I know this thing has massive usage as a rain setter and competitive, but in a regular playthrough, it's just kind of your run-of-the-mill water type. It does get some good TMs even all the way back in Gen 2, but unlike most Johto Pokemon we've done so far, Politoed is pretty much the same in every game, which isn't a bad thing at all. It's pretty good with moves like Surf, Earth Power, Psychic. It's not bad at all. 3 stars. Poliwag got a 4 in availability, but the fact that Politoed is not only a trait evolution, but you also need a King's Rock, which is locked behind either further HM requirements or searching for one on wild Slowpokes, is rough. So I really want to increase the penalty to 1.5 stars, but since the item is available, even if it's annoying, it'll just go down to 3 stars. I do like the idea of Politoed though, since Poliwrath's whole concept was the tadpole who never fully reached maturity due to neoteny, or however you say it. Politoed is then the tadpole who did, and finally became a frog. So as much as you can say, it's literally just a frog, well, yes, but it also has a nice reasoning behind it, along with there also being a hint at the story of the prince being turned into a frog and all the King's Rock and all that good stuff, but I think that's a stretch. 3.5 stars. Its design, well, it's a frog, alright. The only reason it looks even remotely related to its pre-evolutions is the swirl on its belly, and I'll admit, this is by far my favorite in its line, but at the end of the day, it's just kind of a cute frog. Its stats nothing special, 3.5 stars. So that all gives Politoed 3.25 stars overall, surprisingly lower than Poliwrath. Hoppip is one of the Pokemon I always think of whenever I think of Johto. We're rating them all, and it's definitely not because of its battle prowess. Its stats are just awful, but it does have some uses with a lot of support and survivability with the status powders and synthesis. But its only attacking move other than Tackle doesn't come until Gen 6 with Fairy Wind, but the utility it provides is worth something, so it'll get 2 stars. Then it's actually only available in 2 regions, not including Pokeradar Shenanigans, Post-Game, or Paldea's Open World. But you can get it before the second gym in both Johto and Kalos, so that's clearly 5 stars. Now on the Meganium video, you guys roasted me for not knowing the correct anatomy of plants, so I'll try my best here. But Hoppip appears pretty clearly to be based on the bulb and the sprouting leaves of a dandelion, even throwing in some cat-like features as a nod to the cat's ear plant, with its leaves being like helicopter blades, and I think that's a pretty creative idea for a grass and flying type, 4 stars. Its design is actually really cute. I've always loved Hoppip and just wished it was better. It portrays the concept really well, as it's clearly the beginning stages of a dandelion cycle in its evolution line. It's just so adorable and happy. I like it a lot, 4 stars, which gives Hoppip the final score of 3.75 stars. Skiploom is up next as we rate them all, and it's sadly just pretty bad. 45 in both attack stats, and it isn't even that bulky. Its 80 speed though does pair nicely with its support moves like Leech Seed and the status powders. It may be boring, but I've ran Skiploom as just Leech Seed, Synthesis, Poison Powder, and played the stall game, and it's not fun at all, but it isn't useless. At least you could start to get some attacking moves before it evolves again with like Mega Drain and some useful TMs, 2 stars. Its availability will stay the same 5 stars like Hoppip, and its concept is just the next step in the dandelion life cycle, now the pretty yellow flower, which makes perfect sense in the line and is still a great idea, 4 stars. But its design, I don't get why it looks so bad. It portrays the concept well, it's clearly the flower part of the dandelion, even using it as a little parachute or something, and it has mildly cat or dog features similar to Hoppip. It sounds like it should look great, but it just doesn't. It doesn't have any of the cuteness or whimsy of Hoppip or Jumpluff. It's just a green blob. I'm sorry, but I'm not a fan at all, 2 stars. Which still lands Skiploom a surprisingly high 3.25 stars overall. We're just a hop, skip, and a Jumpluff away from my favorite Johto Pokemon. We're rating them all, and Jumpluff is so underrated. Yes, its offensive stats are pretty rough, but with its speed, defenses, and support moves like Leech Seed, status powders, and healing with Synthesis and Giga Drain, it can hold its own. In later gens, you could even run like Swords Dance Acrobatics if you really want to, especially with said survivability. It's pretty hilarious. Jumpluff is no powerhouse, but it can be really solid. At least in some of the newer games, you can get some really useful TMs like Trailblaze and U-Turn and Dazzling Gleam, Giga Drain, Pollen Puff, Lunge. It does have some uses. 3 stars. Availability is once again 5 stars, and its concept is the really nice conclusion to this whole line's life cycle of dandelions, now with Jumpluff being, I don't know what it's called, the fluffy ball of seeds that floats around. Once again, a really nice idea for a grass and flying type, 4 stars. Then its design, I think, is really great. It's adorable, unique, has a great shiny, even if that doesn't matter here. I think this is the perfect conclusion to the Hoppip line, and I think it's really underrated, 4.5 stars, which actually lands Jumpluff a shocking 4.125 stars overall, and a spot on the Johto top 5 for now. Aipom is surprisingly good in a playthrough. We're rating them all, and I'll be honest, I had no idea it had 70 attack and 85 speed. I always thought it was more of a gimmick Pokemon with Baton Pass, but those stats are actually really good, considering you can find it as early as right after the second gym in Johto. Granted, in true Gen 2 it is much worse since it doesn't evolve and it's going to get severely outclassed late game, but in Gen 4 onward you only have to use it until level 32, and in that case it's pretty solid. Its moveset is pretty awful, but at least in Johto Headbutt is free and it gets plenty of really good TM options like U-Turn, Shadow Claw, Brick Break, Dig, and Thunder Wave. It would probably get a 4 in Gen 4, but a 2 in Gen 2, so it'll get 3 stars in Battle Prowess. And in case you didn't pick up on it, it's actually only available pre-Elite 4 in Johto and Sinnoh, but in both of those regions it's available before the second gym, so that'll be 5 stars. Aipom is then obviously based on an assortment of monkeys, but with an exaggerated prehensile tail, making it a huge hand, which is pretty funny, but not all that interesting, 2.5 stars. Despite the simple concept, however, I really like its design. The goofy or even mischievous smile, the unique purple fur, even though like typical toddler bedhead, I think it does a really good job of showing off a silly little monkey. It's just a goofy little guy. I like it. 3.5 stars, which ends up giving Aipom the final score of 3.5 stars overall. Is Sunkern the worst Pokemon of all time? We're rating them all, and it's definitely close. Its base stat total is only 180. It has 30 in each stat, which is obviously horrible. Its move pool in Gen 2 was fine, I suppose, but at least it gets Leech Seed in Gen 4, but then now in Gen 9 it lost it again. I don't understand why you would nerf Sunkern, but here we are. It It isn't completely useless, but it's pretty close. 0.5 stars in battle prowess. Its real only saving grace is its availability. You can get it before the 3rd gym in Johto, then right before the 1st in Unova. But then it isn't actually available in any other region pre-Elite Four, not including Pokéradar or Paldea, because I don't know how to handle that yet, so we're ignoring it, which means Sunkern squeaks out the 5-star availability. It is pretty clearly based on a sunflower seed, which is at least a cute idea for a grass type, but otherwise pretty uninteresting. 2 stars. As for its design, I've always found it to be one of those, aw, look how pathetic it is kind of cute. And at least it's a happy little fella, which is fitting for a sunflower, but I mean, it's Sunkern. Even you hooligans who vote 5 stars on everything don't like Sunkern. 2 stars. Which lands Sunkern the final score of 2.375 stars overall, and even frees Furret from the new bottom 5. This isn't a hot take in the slightest, but I'm still mad that Sunflora wasn't the first grass and fire type. We're rating them all, and you guys are gonna think I'm crazy on this one, but is Sunflora kinda good? 105 special attack and decent special bulk, but I mean, yeah, to be fair, 30 speed, even with its chlorophyll ability, is gonna hold it back for sure. In Gen 2, it just wasn't really good at all. Sure, Sunny Day Solar Beam is good, but its ability didn't exist there, and its move pool is barren otherwise. In Gens 4 and 5, it's pretty good with Leech Seed, Giga Drain, and that same Sun combo, and then in Gen 9, it gets some pretty nice TM coverage, but it's gonna be pretty severely outclassed thanks to power creep, so I think 2.5 stars is fair for battle prowess. Sunstones really aren't difficult to get, even in the land of no stones, Johto, so it'll stay Sunkern's 5 stars for availability. Its concept is somehow even more boring than Sunkern's, now just being a literal sunflower who's happy and facing the sun, which, yeah, makes perfect sense, but pretty boring for a Pokemon, especially considering how much cooler this could have been as part fire type. It really got robbed. 1.5 stars. Then its design is once again worse than Sunkern's. Sunflowers are such cool flowers in real life. You could have done so much more here, but instead it's the most plain and generic drawing of a yellow flower possible with a happy face scribbled on it. Sunflora is just such a disappointing Pokemon. 1 star. So that gives the final score of 2.5 stars, once again freeing quite a few Pokemon from the bottom 5. Johto's Pokedex really was mid at best. We're rating them all, and Yanma is a great example of that. Don't get me wrong, I love Yanma, but it was just not strong enough to be a single stage Pokemon. Sure, 95 speed is great, and 75 and 65 for its attacks are pretty good when you first get it, but in Gen 2, before it can evolve, it's gonna be just obsolete halfway through the game. And honestly, even after that, when you only have to use it until level 33, it's still just bad. Its move pool is awful, even in Gen 6, so as much as I hate to do it, that's 2 stars in battle prowess at best. Should probably be lower. As for availability, its encounter rate may be awful, but regardless, you can get it before the 3rd gym in Johto, before the 5th in Platinum, and before the 3rd in Kalos. So that averages out to 4 stars. Ugh, Yanma's concept, it's literally just the dragonfly, guys. It pains me to do it, but that's a 1-star concept. However, I have always loved its design. It's simple, it doesn't do anything special other than being a big anime-style dragonfly, and maybe this is just because Bug is my favorite type, but it just looks so good. I'm so glad it finally got the evolution it deserved. 3.5 stars, which gives Yanma 2.625 stars overall, just missing out on the bottom 5. Wooper is definitely a Johto fan favorite for some reason. We're rating them all, and it's okay in battle. 55 HP and 45 in attack and defense are alright, but 25 special defense and 15 speed? So bad. It does have a pretty nice early move pool, except that all of its good moves are special, so not good at all coming from Wooper. Its main selling point is its typing. Water and ground is one of the best typings in the game, then made even better with its water absorb ability, effectively giving it 2 immunities and only 1 weakness. 2.5 stars in battle prowess, but it's no Mudkip. It ranges from being available before the 2nd gym in Johto, before the 5th in Sinnoh, and the 6th in Kalos, but then the 1st in Galar, so that helps bring up its average back up to 4 stars. Wooper then seems to be based on a larval salamander, or more specifically an axolotl, which is another one of those it's just an animal concepts, but at least it's a unique animal for a unique typing, so 2 stars. Its design, however, is or at least seems to be one of the more popular Pokemon in Johto, but I'll admit I've never understood why. Wooper and Quagsire have never done anything for me at all, but believe it or not, I don't base these entirely off of my opinion. At the end of the day, it is still a really good design. It's a unique little mudfish with beady little eyes and no arms. It is pretty cute, I guess. 3.5 stars. So that leaves Wooper with an even 3 stars overall. Quagsire is a massive improvement from Wooper. We're rating them all, and it is much better in battle, of course. 95 HP and 85 in its physical stats, and then even its lower special stats are great considering it's an early evolution. As we said with Wooper, its water ground typing, especially with water absorb, is an amazing typing with 2 immunities and 1 weakness. It's pretty good in Gen 2 with just Earthquake and Surf, but it just gets better with each generation. In Gen 4, it adds Yawn and Waterfall for a physical water move, along with some great TMs there onward. It's far from the best water or ground type, and it is going to start to fall off in the late game, but it's pretty solid, 3.5 stars. Wooper's availability was a 4, but I think considering the fact that you can actually get Quagsire before Wooper and Kalos, on top of just being a fully evolved Pokemon at level 20, deserves a higher score, 4.5 stars. But Quagsire is just a giant salamander, which is even less interesting than Wooper, but at least once again interesting for its typing, 1.5 stars. Its design, as I said with Wooper, Kyogre, I'm not really a fan. Really, as a whole, I don't like the derpy looking Pokemon with a few exceptions, and Quagsire is a really good example of why. It's just a chunky blue salamander with literal dots for eyes. I know that Quagsire is loved and that it isn't actually a bad design at all, but it's not a great one either. 3 stars, which gives Quagsire the final score of 3.125 stars. Will Espeon take the crown for the best overall Johto Pokemon? We're rating them all, and Espeon is amazing in battle. Its 130 special attack, 110 speed, 95 special defense are amazing. Along with Psychic just being a great type for a playthrough, it's arguably the best evolution in game. With Psychic, Calm Mind, and Shadow Ball, it crushes most regions. I'll be totally transparent here, I already had this video made and complete and gave it 5 stars here. But one thing just kept bringing me back and second guessing. The fact that it doesn't get Psychic until post-game in Johto. To be fair, it still does great with just Psybeam, as I showed in my last stream. With those stats and typing alone, it deserves at least 4.5 stars. Eevee got 4.5 stars in availability, but as I more or less already said in the baby Pokemon videos, friendship evolutions definitely aren't gonna get a penalty. In fact, being able to get this far superior Pokemon right away without actually needing to progress at all deserves a slight boost. So Espeon's availability is 5 stars. Eevee and most of its evolutions so far have gotten 5-star concepts, and Espeon has so much to it I can barely fit it on the screen. It has so many different mythological references and different cats it's modeled off of, on top of just starting from the great concept of an Eevee mutating into a mysterious and powerful psychic type. Once again, an easy 5 stars. It all comes down to design, and Espeon looks incredible. I know I've had mixed reviews of simple Pokemon, some are bland and boring, and some have that perfect balance of just simple enough. Espeon's forked yokai tail, mysterious eerie eyes, the mind's eye gem on the forehead, they did a perfect job of portraying its psychic and enigmatic nature with the little details. Espeon is peak Pokemon design, 5 stars. So that gives Espeon the final score of 4.875 stars, not quite our second perfect 5-star Pokemon, but clearly atop the Johto top 5. Umbreon is so iconic, but can it match its Johto counterpart? Near perfect performance. We're rating them all, and well, in battle, it's awesome, but unlike Espeon, its defensive build with over 100 in both defenses, and otherwise slow and not hitting hard, just isn't as useful for a playthrough. Now, that's not to say it's useless. Okay, in Gen 2, it's actually pretty bad. Other than Confuse Ray, it's pretty much useless. Its main draw is that it's a stall and support mon with Toxic, Moonlight, Confuse Ray, then it gets even better in later gens with moves like Snarl and Dark Pulse. And in that case, it obviously excels. It's an amazing tank, but unless you're just spamming healing items, Umbreon just isn't as good as using an offensive Pokemon, and it's pretty boring to use. 4 stars. Availability, as we went over with Espeon, starts at Eevee's 4.5 stars, but with it being a friendship evolution, that'll boost it to 5 stars. And its concept, similarly to Espeon, is amazing and has more mythological and historical references than I can mention. They really went all out with the Johto evolutions. It mutating and evolving into this cat moon deity, come on, 5 stars. And Umbreon has arguably the most popular design in Johto, and I can see why. In fact, it actually has by far the most overwhelmingly 5-star polls I've ever seen. It's far from my favorite evolution, but the yellow Egyptian lunar rings contrasting with its black fur is just such an iconic and sleek look. Its overall appearance is once again super simple, but simplicity and design done right is underrated. Also, it does have arguably the best shiny of all time, but that doesn't count here. Either way though, that's 5 stars, which lands Umbreon the final score of 4.75 stars overall, not quite reaching Espeon, but clearly top 5. They did Murkrow so dirty. We're rating them all, and Murkrow is just not good enough to stand on its own. Its stat spread is very similar to Yanma actually, and has the same story. Sure, it's fast and hits pretty hard, and I would say that it sucks to use in the generations where it doesn't evolve, but it isn't even usable until post-game in said regions. So its battle prowess should be helped by that, since you only have to use it until it evolves. Or it would be if that wasn't also super late in most games. But if you were to use it, it's garbage in Gen 2, kind of decent in Gen 4 actually, and at least in Gen 7 gets some really solid TM options. This is a really tough one to rate honestly, but I think 2.5 stars is fair. And as I pretty heavily hinted at there, its availability is ridiculous. It isn't available in Johto at all. You have to get it in Kanto in the Johto games. In Sinnoh, it's actually available before the 2nd gym, but as a version exclusive. Then not until after the 6th gym in Kalos, and even worse, it's not until right after the last trial in Alola, but then the first trial in Ultra Alola. So I can't believe it, but that actually averages out to 3.5 stars. Its concept is actually pretty fantastic. You take a crow, a bird typically ascribed with dark folklore, and slap a whole bunch of witch inspiration on top, and you have yourself a great concept for a dark and flying type, 4 stars. Then its design just absolutely delivers on that. The witch hat, the beak that could be taken as a hooked nose, the broomstick tail, so well done. I don't even really like Murkrow at all, but this is an incredible design that paints its concept perfectly. But it does feel like it's just missing something keeping it from being among the best. I don't know what, but that's 4.5 stars. So that all boils down to a stunningly high 3.625 stars for Murkrow. Slowking's up next as we rate them all, and in battle it is amazing just like Slowbro, who got 5 stars. Their stats are actually identical other than swapping defenses. They're both super underrated with moves like Psychic, Surf, Yawn, Amnesia, Calm Mind, Slack Off, a bunch of amazing TMs for coverage. If you use them right, they're basically unstoppable. However, the main difference is the fact that Slowking trades out Slack Off for Nasty Plot, which is scary and all, but with its low speed and already having access to Calm Mind, that feels like a definite downgrade. But it actually gets both of them in Gen 8, and I don't really see that as a reason to dock its score either way, 5 stars. As for availability, Slowpoke got 4 stars, and Slowbro got a dock to 3.5 for being such a late evolution. And as we mentioned with Politoed, being a trade evolution with an item requirement on top will also definitely be a dock. So if you take out Kanto, since Slowking isn't available there anyway, it all averages out to 4.5 stars, so with the penalty, it'll be 3.5 stars. The concept of Slowpoke somehow getting fishing so wrong that a shelter bites its head and injects poison that makes it smarter is hilarious, unique, and creative. Along with just the normal pluses of this line and some mythological references on top, that's 5 stars. Its design, however, I think is quite the downgrade from Slowbro. It's still good, don't get me wrong. The shelter, now forming a crown, is a really nice touch, and I do love this line's designs as a whole, but turning the lovable derp into an upstanding citizen with a stupid life raft collar, it's still good, but it's so much worse. 3.5 stars, which lands Slowking the final score of 4.25 stars overall and a spot on the top 5. Starting to look good. What is Johto's obsession with making mid-Pokemon that don't evolve and aren't even usable in Johto? We're reading them all, and Misdreavus' stats are actually kind of decent. 85 in special stats and speed is really good for the early game and until it evolves in the regions it's available. Its move pool is pretty good in Gen 4 with Confuse Ray, Psybeam, and Shadow Ball, then in Gen 7 it does get Hex early, which is nice, and of course it does have some solid TM options. Not to mention its 2 immunities thanks to Levitate, and I'm actually pleasantly surprised with Misdreavus. 3.5 stars. Its availability is ridiculous, just like Murkrow's. Oh, and I actually did do the math wrong on Murkrow's video. It's supposed to be 3 stars, not 3.5, so that's been fixed on the docs. And Misdreavus has pretty much the exact same availability with the exception of being available before the 6th gym in the Johto remakes, which ends up averaging out to the same 3 stars. Misdreavus is then pretty obviously, well, a ghost, but it is based off quite a few different types of spirits in folklore, and more specifically a banshee, a spirit known for screaming and wailing, which is also just literally a Misdreavus dex entry. So while it's not all that creative, it's still an awesome concept for the second ever ghost Pokemon. 4 stars. Its design is simple yet really well done. It's a pretty stereotypical floating head or even bedsheet looking ghost, but with the flair of the flowing hair that looks like wisps, the jewelry, the big eyes to give it just enough cute to be a convincing first stage Pokemon, but sadly another one of our loved ones destroyed by 3D. Either way though, 4 stars, which ends up giving Misdreavus the final score of 3.625 stars overall. Unknown is the epitome of gimmick Pokemon. We're rating them all, and at least in battle, this thing is pretty obviously awful. Its stats are okay for the early game, but clearly bad later on, and its only move being Hidden Power, it's a fun idea. I think it's pretty clear that this was never intended to be a Pokemon used for battle, but that doesn't save it from getting 0.5 stars in battle prowess. It is, however, technically available before the 2nd gym in Johto, the 3rd in Sinnoh, and we haven't counted Mirage encounters so far in the series, so we won't start now, so that averages out to 5 stars. Then Unknown is pretty clearly based off of the alphabet, or even as the Pokemon world's hieroglyphics, which is a pretty cool idea, especially the whole they're weak alone but get stronger in groups, forming words and such, but I really wish they would have expanded on that, making them stronger if you had more in your party or something along those lines, but regardless, 4 stars. Its design I think is a perfect case study on how we handle design ratings in this series. The 2 leading scores in the polls are 1 and 5, which is hilarious, but makes perfect sense. There are 2 things that we mostly look at. Does the design convey its purpose, and how good does it look for what it's supposed to be? While the other side is just a simple eye test. How cool or cute or monstrous or whatever is this Pokemon? I totally see the reasoning behind voting 1 or even 0 if that were an option, as well as voting 5. So I think I'll actually meet in the middle here and go with 2.5 stars. So that actually gives Unknown an even 3 stars overall, which definitely seems high. How the heck do we handle Wobbuffet? We're rating them all, and it's yet another gimmick Pokemon, kinda. So you guys are gonna have to go easy on me with this one. In battle it can be awesome, but it's definitely more of an opponent Pokemon if that makes any sense. Like if you aren't careful, especially in Nuzlocke, this thing is so dangerous and can easily cost you a few Pokemon. But if you're trying to use it yourself, unless you're abusing healing items, all it's good for is 1 or 2 cheap KOs if you play your cards right with either Counter, Mirror Coat, or Destiny Bond, but it's otherwise useless. So I think I'll give it 2.5 stars for battle prowess, but I'm definitely not confident on that one. It isn't available in Gold and Silver until right before the 8th gym, but then you can get it in the Game Corner in Crystal, and otherwise it's all over the place for the rest of the regions, but it averages out to 3.5 stars. Wobbuffet is basically a literal punching bag combined with little wobble dolls or whatever, which is pretty funny and unique, 3.5 stars. As for its design, yeah, I guess it's vaguely a punching bag doll thing, or is it actually the tail? It never actually specifically states that, but in every dex entry it talks about how sensitive it is one way or another, but I just don't get it. I don't see the visual draw to Wobbuffet at all. Yet you guys still voted this thing 5 stars. In the awesome world of Pokemon, you think Wobbuffet is peak design? This is a perfect example of why I don't trust the polls. 2 stars. So that lands Wobbuffet 2.875 stars overall. Girafarig would have made so much more sense as a dark psychic or normal dark type. We're rating them all, and Girafarig was the first normal psychic type, which is really interesting for sure. It only has 2 weaknesses, but also only has 1 immunity and 1 resistance. It takes a page from Kanto's book and has its stats super balanced, but honestly between 80 and 90 for both attacks and speed is pretty good for how early in the game you can get it. In my last stream I used Strength, Psychic, Agility, and Baton Pass, and it was honestly such a monster. As a whole, between its utility, strong offensive moves, and TM usage, it's definitely underrated, but its stats are obviously going to keep it from being too useful in the late game, so 3 stars. You can get it before the 4th gym in Johto, in the Safari Zone in Hoenn, and before the 4th gym in Sinnoh, which averages out to 3.5 stars. Girafarig's concept is simple but good. It's a giraffe, but it has this genetic chimerism with a tail that has its own brain and personality that's prone to biting if you get close, which is why I said this would have been so much better as either normal dark or psychic dark, but either way, 3 stars. And I actually really like its design. It's a cute baby giraffe on the front half with its dark and dangerous back half. Its name being a palindrome, it really is just the embodiment of duality. I don't know why, but I've always had a soft spot for Girafarig, even though I never actually use it. 4 stars, which then gives Girafarig the final score of 3.375 stars. Pineco definitely exists. We're rating them all, and in battle the bug typing is amazing offensively, but one of the worst defensively. So no surprise that a defensive bug type is kind of bad. Sure, 90 defense and 65 attack are really good in the early game, but with its crippled speed and special defense, it just isn't enough. In Gen 2, it didn't even have any bug moves. It basically just exists to go boom, which sure, I suppose is worth something. At least with Bug Bite in Gen 4, it actually is pretty decent in the early game though, 2.5 stars. You can then get it before the 3rd gym in Johto, surprisingly early in Sinnoh, but only if you have Pokemon Emerald in your GBA slot, so we won't count that, and otherwise it isn't available until the 3rd island in Alola, so that averages out to 4 stars. But Pineco is just literally a pinecone. I'm just kidding, it actually seems to be based off of a bagworm, which resembles pinecones, but with a bit of an explosive surprise for whoever knocks it out of its tree. Its design is super simple, but I do think that it's pretty clever as well. At face value, it's just a literal pinecone, but I love how it pretty heavily resembles a grenade, considering its whole thing is going boom when disturbed. Nice shiny too. I like Pineco, but I think 3 stars is fair, which ends up giving Pineco a pretty fitting 3.125 stars overall. Finally, the red bug and steel type Pokemon from Johto we've all been waiting for, Forretress. We're rating them all, and remember how with Pineco I said trying to make a defensive bug type doesn't work? Well, that's true until you throw the steel type on it. Then you couple its 140 defense, 90 attack, and 8 resistances, and as many immunities as it has weaknesses, and you've got yourself an actual tank. True, Gen 2 gave most Pokemon bad movesets, but they really just did Forretress unnecessarily dirty. Thankfully in Gen 4 onward, they do fix that with Bug Bite, Toxic Spikes, Payback, Iron Defense, Gyro Ball, and some pretty awesome TMs. Granted, even then its 40 speed and 60 special defense will hold it back a little bit in the late game, but if you're careful with your matchups and use it primarily as a physical tank, it's awesome. 4 stars. I always thought this was another Metal Coat trade evolution, but nope, it's just a level up one, so it'll stay Pineco's 4 stars for availability. Forretress then takes Pineco's cute little grenade concept and turns it into a full-blown bug fortress. It's capable of shooting out pieces of its shell, which is so awesome. 4 stars. And as for its design, as I've said, bug type is my favorite type, but Forretress just kind of loses me a little bit. Now, I'm not saying it's bad at all. It still looks cool. It's a fortress bug with cannons. How could you not love it? But I don't know what it is. Maybe it just looks too disconnected from Pineco. Maybe it's just too busy looking. I really can't put my finger on why, but I think I'll go with 3 stars. So that lands Forretress the final score of 3.75 stars overall. Johto strikes again with yet another mid-single stage Pokemon. We're rating them all, and Dunsparce's stats are at least surprisingly decent. I'll admit I've never actually used it, but 100 HP and around 70 in its other stats other than speed is pretty awesome for the early game. Its moveset in Gen 2 was genuinely useless. Even in Gen 4, it didn't get much better at all. But at least it does get some pretty decent TM coverage. Now, none of these crazy moves will hit too hard coming from Dunsparce, but still, it's enough to make it at least usable in the late game, 2.5 stars. But it is available super early in Johto, Unova, Kalos, and Alola. I'm once again surprised, but that's clearly 5 stars. And Dunsparce actually has a shockingly rich concept. It's based off of a handful of things, like the Bee Snake, a Japanese cryptid, Digger Bees, Blind Snakes, Quetzalcoatl's. The only way this could be better is if they made Dunsparce the first bug and dragon type, but that's still a 5-star concept. Its design though is and always has been just a confusing and weird normal type that never made any sense at all until I did research for this video. And then sure, the eyelids, little wings, and drill tail make a lot more sense, but if you don't Google the thing, it's just a nonsensical yellow thing. Then they just proved the fact that Dunsparce is a joke of a Pokemon by giving a literal joke of an evolution just to troll its fanbase, which is admittedly hilarious, but yeah, let's be honest here, it's a pretty mid design at best, 2 stars. But even with that, Dunsparce ends up getting a shockingly high 3.625 stars overall. Gligar is so awesome, we're rating them all, and we're finally at the good part of the Johto decks. Its stats are pretty solid with high defense and good speed and attack, but the Gen 2 move pools strike again. They didn't give Gligar a single flying or ground type move at all other than Sand Attack, so it's obviously horrible in Gen 2, especially since it can't evolve. And then even in Gen 4, they give its move pool a huge buff with Swords Dance, U-Turn, X-Scissor, TMs for Earthquake and Roost. Then even in the other generations, it gets all sorts of awesome moves like the Elemental Fangs, but you still can't evolve it in most of these generations. You're pretty much stuck with Gligar into the late or post game, so that's really gonna hurt it and cap it off at 3 stars. You then can't even get Gligar until right before the 8th gym in Johto, and it's a version exclusive. Then it's a similar story in every other region being a super late game, other than Platinum where you can get it pretty early, which averages out to a rough 2.5 stars for Gligar's availability. It's then based on a mix of bats, gargoyles, and scorpions, or more simply, pretty much literally just this yokai that's a flying scorpion, which of course makes for an amazing idea for a Pokemon, 5 stars. And I think its design is fantastic. I think it mixes the dangerous look with the scorpion tail, claws, teeth, pointy wings with an equal amount of cute with the permanent face, big eyes, chubby belly. Honestly, I think this is perfect. This is peak design for a first stage Pokemon, 5 stars, which then averages out to give Gligar the final score of 3.875 stars overall. Steelix is definitely one of the coolest Johto Pokemon. We're rating them all, and in battle, it's really solid. With 200 defense and 85 in attack, it's going to win most physical matchups it's in. It does have a fair amount of weaknesses, but with 8 resistances and 2 immunities to boot. Its Gen 2 level up moves are bad other than Rage, but with TMs for Iron Tail, Earthquake, and physical Hyper Beams, it's still pretty awesome. Then it obviously just gets better with each generation, with the Elemental Fangs, Rock Polish, and Physical Crunch in Gen 4, and Sturdy actually being good post Gen 5. As a whole, it's very good, but its speed and special defense really hold it back, and it's only going to hit so hard with 85 attack, so I think 4 stars is fair, but I could see 4.5. As for availability, you have to start with Onix, who, not including Kanto, is available super early everywhere but Unova. But the earliest you can get a Metal Coat in each game is the determining factor here, which I know gets convoluted, but I promise I did the research and the math, so after the Trade Evolution penalty, it ends up averaging out to 3 stars. Its concept is, well, a Steel Snake, which is the perfect evolution from the Rock Snake. It may also take some inspiration from these burrowing dragons, which would explain why it gets Dragon Breath, but the idea of an Onix burrowing so deep that the exposure to the heat and pressure has transformed it and melded it into a Steel type is just fantastic. 5 stars. And as for its design, Steelix is one of the most iconic Pokemon from Gen 2. It's massive, imposing, and threatening. Such an awesome looking Pokemon. Its Gen 2 sprite was just chef's kiss, but man, talk about a downgrade in 3D. Thankfully, that doesn't matter here, and Steelix is clearly a 5-star design, which lands Steelix the final score of 4.25 stars, which is starting to get crowded. Do you think they'll last in the top 5 until the end of Johto? Mega Steelix is a great example of Megas done right. We're rating them all, and in battle, it's just ridiculous. 230 defense, 125 attack, shoot, even 95 special defense. Couple that with its host of resistances and immunities, and it's not going to be easy to take down. Then you throw on its Sand Force ability, boosting its move by an additional 30% in the sand, and your Earthquakes, Iron Tails, and Rock Slides are gonna hit like a truck. Then just for good measure, you add on Stealth Rock, Autotomize, and great coverage moves. I mean, come on, easy 5 stars. And as for availability, you can get the Steelixite around the 6th gym, which is typical for a Mega, so it'll stay Steelix's 3 stars. And the whole idea for Steelix was forming a steel exterior from the heat and pressure in the depths of the earth, and Mega Steelix just takes that to its logical next step, which is that diamonds form under those same conditions, which could also be a nod to the Crystal Onyx in the anime, and that's some nice fan service. 5 stars. And its design, I would argue, is one of the best Megas, period. I had it at the top of my Megas tier list, and this is exactly what Megas should be in my opinion. Take an already awesome Pokemon and just evolve its existing design and concept to the next level. The crystal growth, the magnetism, absolutely incredible design for a creature that lives in the depths of the earth. Easy 5 stars. Which lands Mega Steelix the final score of 4.5 stars and a spot on the Megas top 5. Snubbull is an interesting one. We're rating them all, and in battle it's not amazing, but it can hold its own with its good attack and HP, but its other stats are pretty rough. In Gen 2, it's, I mean, why are you using this thing in Gen 2? But hey, in Gen 4, not only does it get one of the best abilities in the game, Intimidate, but it also gets a much better move pool. Then again, in Gen 6, it gets another buff, becoming a Fairy type. All things considered, it's pretty decent, 3 stars. And as for availability, you can get it somewhere around the 3rd or 4th gym in every region that it's in, other than Alola, where you can't get it until Pony Island. So that's really gonna bring down its average to 3.5 stars. Snubbull is pretty obviously a bulldog, but a pampered bulldog with a pretty pink dress and a stereotypical scared little dog tough guy facade, which is fine, I suppose, and it may have some inspiration from Celtic dog fairies, but I think that's more of a retcon. 3 stars. And as for its design, I know it's supposed to be that brand of cute that's just like, oh, look how ugly it is, which yeah, I suppose it pulls that off well, especially with the big underbite, then you throw the frilly dress on top of it all, and yeah, I could totally see this thing yapping at cars through Goldenrod City, but it's just so unappealing. I don't think I've ever met a Snubbull fan. 2 stars. So Snubbull gets another mid-Johto score of 2.875 stars overall. Granbull's up next as we rate them all, and at first glance, it's 120 attack and 90 HP. It looks strong, but its 45 speed and not great defense has really hurt it. It's so bad in Gen 2, but similarly to Snubbull, it does get better with each generation. In Gen 4, it gets Intimidate, the Elemental Fangs, Crunch, and plenty of good TMs. Then in Gen 6 onward, it's a Fairy type that gets not only Play Rough, but also Outrage, and can learn so many TMs, which I don't understand why. So I think with all of that, it'll average out to 3.5 stars in Battle Prowess. Its availability will be the same as Snubbull at 3.5 stars, and it takes the concept from Snubbull as a pampered little ugly purse dog and evolves it into an actual big, intimidating bulldog. But hilariously enough, according to its dex entries, it's actually really timid and sensitive, which is a really nice juxtaposition and fits nicely with its Fairy type. 3.5 stars. Granbull's design, though, as much as I've always loved it for no good reason, I think isn't as interesting as Snubbull's. Other than the exaggerated fangs and being bipedal, it's just a literal bulldog. It's just kind of okay. I don't really have anything negative to say other than the fact that it's kind of too plain, but I guess it is a cool and intimidating looking dog. 2.5 stars, which lands Granbull the final score of 3.125 stars overall. Don't lie, you forgot Qwilfish existed. We're rating them all, and at first glance from its stats, 95 attack, 85 in defense and speed, and you'd think, yeah, it's pretty good. But sadly, up until Gen 4, being a physical water type is just awful unless your name is Gyarados. Sure, before said physical special split, its poison moves were at least physical. Oh, it only got Poison Sting until you got the TM for Sludge Bomb? That and the fact that Poison wasn't even a worthwhile offensive type until Gen 6? That's rough. All jokes aside, it did get a real redemption arc in the later gens with physical water moves, Toxic Spikes, and Poison Jab, which is cool, but it's still pretty subpar for a playthrough. 2.5 stars. It's actually only found on one route in Johto, but you can get it as soon as you get the Good Rod after the 4th gym, then with the Super Rod after the 6th gym in Kalos, and after the 3rd gym in Galar, so that averages out to 3.5 stars for availability. Qwilfish is a nice mix between either a puffer or lionfish and a naval mine, which is a good concept. It's not too interesting, and it's a pretty easy connection to make, but still, 3 stars. And its design is once again okay. I do like how it kind of looks like a naval mine, but other than that, it's just a literal pufferfish. Let's be honest here, Qwilfish is really boring and completely forgettable. 2 stars. So that ends up giving Qwilfish the final score of 2.75 stars overall. Scizor is probably the best Johto Pokemon, so let's see where it lands as we rate them all. It's so awesome in battle. Bug Steel is an amazing typing with 8 resistances and only 1 weakness. Then you take Scizor's 130 attack, 100 defense, and its incredible Technician ability, which patches up its poor speed with boosted priority bullet punches. I used this thing in my last stream and it just completely manhandled Lance's Dragonites. And in case that isn't enough, it also gets agility, iron defense, and sword stance, so you can just set up whichever way you want and just go to town with all of these great moves and then roost up. Easily the best battle prowess in Johto so far. 5 stars. And as for availability, we have to start with Scyther's already pretty rough 3 stars. And Scizor is another Metal Coat trait evolution, but unlike Steelix, whose score I fixed since it is available in game otherwise, Scizor is not. So it gets the full trade penalty and gets a really sad 2 stars. And in terms of concept, Scyther got 5 stars for being a kaiju praying mantis monster with sword arms. I mean, come on. And Scizor is pretty much just Scyther with a metal coat, which is awesome. I really don't see a reason to nerf it there. 5 stars. But its design is still to this day one of the coolest Pokemon of all time. It's still one of my favorites, and alongside Scyther, the reason why Bug is my favorite type. I love the crimson red take on the metal coat and just the general streamlining of Scyther's already incredible design. It rivals Umbreon for overwhelmingly 5-star polls, and I clearly agree. 5 stars. So that all lands Scizor the final score of 4.25 stars and a spot on the Johto top 5 for now, but I'm afraid that our boy won't last. Mega Scizor is honestly disappointing. We're rating them all, and well, at least in battle, it's pretty obviously not. 150 attack, 140 defense, Technician, Bullet Punch, Sword Dance, U-Turn, Roost. It's a monster in battle prowess, and it's clearly not what I meant. That's obviously 5 stars. Its availability is pretty rough. You can't even get a Scyther, let alone Scizor, until after the 8th gym in Kalos. Then its Mega Stone isn't available at all until the post-game. So even if you compare that to other Megas for availability, that's still 1 star at best. Its concept isn't a disappointment either, actually. That's pretty amazing. It takes the already awesome metal-coated kaiju mantis thing, and when it Mega evolves, it takes on a more diabolical form and becomes pretty brutal, honestly. 5 stars. And in case you didn't guess it, its design is the disappointment here. I'm sorry, but those new claws just look so over the top and dumb. I know most Megas are a bit extra by design, but that doesn't mean that it always looks good. Along with its legs just being super polygonal now and less bug-like for some reason. I do really like its new shoulder armor and head crest thing, those are cool, but as a whole, Mega Scizzor's design is a pretty major downgrade. 3 stars, which gives Mega Scizzor the final score of 3.5 stars overall. Shuckle is going to be as difficult to figure out as it is to take down. We're rating them all, and in battle, it's interesting for sure. It's one of the best defensive Pokemon ever with 230 in both defenses, but its other stats are basically non-existent. Its only real talking point is Bide, Wrap, Toxic, and Stalling, basically. Other than that, I suppose you could do some Power Trick shenanigans, but that makes Shuckle as frail as paper and just as slow. Then in later gens, you can do Power Split shenanigans, but you get it so late and its uses are so niche. In the majority of playthroughs, Shuckle is going to do nothing but stall and offer some minor support. 1.5 stars for battle prowess. It's actually available before the 4th gym in OG Johto, shockingly, but then as expected in Cyanwood in the remakes, then super late in both Unova and Kalos, and pretty early in Galar, so that averages out to 3.5 stars. This is the first concept in a while that I can't lead with the obvious, because what even is Shuckle? The Pokedex just talks about it being a berry juice appliance, basically, but all jokes aside, it seems to be an entirely original idea, taking inspiration from many things like endoliths, a mold-like creature, certain shelled parasites, pottery used in fermentation, and worm-like nematodes. I honestly have no idea what it is. It's just all over the place, so it's not perfect, but considering how original and unique it is, it'll get a solid 4 stars. And its design is a pretty ambiguous worm thing. This is probably just me from playing too much Halo as a kid, but in my headcanon, this is just a subspecies of the hunters. I don't dislike its design at all, but I don't love it. It is oddly cute for some reason, as well as definitely being unique. Whether I like it or not, this is a good design. 3.5 stars, which then lands Shuckle the final score of 3.125 stars overall. Heracross is a perfect example of simplicity done right. We're rating them all, and in battle, it's so awesome. With decent speed, decent bulk, but 125 attack. With Aerial Ace, Brick Break, Close Combat, Mega Horn, Bulk Up, and some awesome TM coverage. I used it in my video where I was actually the first person to beat a mono fighting Nuzlocke of base Diamond and Pearl, and it was invaluable against Cynthia and the Elite Four. I was leaning towards 4.5 here just for the lack of bug moves, but the fact that you can get it so early in most games, and the cherry on top, guts, which boosts Heracross's attack stat to just ridiculous levels. 5 stars. And as I mentioned, it is available super early. In Johto, you can get it before the 3rd gym and before the 2nd in Sinnoh. Sure, you have to do the Honey Tree and it's annoying, but it's still available. But sadly, it isn't available until later in Unova, Kalos, and Hoenn, so it ends up at 4 stars. Its concept is admittedly its weak point. It's pretty much just a literal rhinoceros beetle, which to be fair was pretty much the inspiration for Pokemon as a whole, so then you just scale it up and make it super. Having it flying around tree to tree, flinging enemies with its Herculean strength, I love it, but I don't think I can go over 3.5 stars. But its design, as I said at the start, is a perfect example of simplicity in design being underrated, with its arm and leg spikes giving it an armored look along with its long arms on the sturdy, strong body, portraying the fighting type really well. But then you give it an adorable little face and smile. Heracross is somehow bad and adorable at the same time. 5 stars. So that lands Heracross the final score, 4.375 stars overall, and a spot on the Johto top 5, fittingly just above Scizor. Megas are definitely the best Pokemon gimmick, but the more that I go over them, I see why some don't agree. We're rating them all, and Mega Heracross is just utterly broken in battle, with 185 attack and its skill link ability, guaranteeing its arm thrust, bullet seeds, and pin missiles to hit 5 times. Along with all of the other solid moves that it gets, I mean, come on, this is obviously 5 stars. And its availability is pretty typical for a Mega. You can get it after the 6th gym in Oras, so that won't change from Heracross's 4 stars. Then when Heracross Mega evolves, it goes from Rhinoceros Beetle with Herculean strength into a Hercules Beetle. And I appreciate the pun, but other than that, the concept is fine. I don't see a reason to lower or raise it from 3.5 stars. And what is it with these Johto bugs giving their Megas weird arms? First Scizor gets jumper cable hands, now Heracross gets water wingies for hands? Like, these are the floaties that you put on a kid in a pool. Why? All jokes aside, it does look more fighting type now, as it's just a huge hulking Hercules beetle, but similarly to Mega Scizor, this is definitely a downgrade in design. 3 stars. So that gives Mega Heracross the final score of 3.875 stars overall. It may be a hot take, but Sneasel is so much cooler than its regional form, it did not need one. We're rating them all, and in battle, its Dark and Ice typing is so cool, but pretty bad. It has so many weaknesses. Then you look at Sneasel's Glass Cannon stats, and you see that you better hope you outspeed in one shot, otherwise you're toast. Ice and Dark both Togetic being special before the split really hurt its ability to do much of anything in Gen 2. Then even in the newer generations, it doesn't get any good offensive options and is super reliant on late game TMs, when you'll probably have it evolved anyway. So Sneasel itself's battle prowess is way worse than I realized, 2 stars at best. And it's pretty famously unavailable. It's post-game in Gold and Silver, then it's in the typical ice area around the 7th gym in Crystal, Sinnoh, Kalos, and even later in Alola. But it's kind of saved by being mid-game in Galar. So that ends up 2 stars, which I think is the worst non-legendary availability so far. Sneasel is pretty directly based on this yokai. Kamaitachi maybe? I don't know. It's a weasel demon with knife hands that's more active in the cold weather. I mean, that's about as clear as it gets, but it's still an insanely cool idea for a Pokemon. 5 stars. Its design I've always felt is underrated. It has a nice mix of black cat, weasel, and just mischievous little guy energy. I love the pretty rare asymmetry with the pretty bold and contrasting feathers that come out of nowhere, which, you know, make no sense at all, but they sure look cool. Sneasel is awesome. 4 stars. Which steals Sneasel the final score of 3.25 stars, and Johto really is just the land of mid, huh? Why is this teddy bear so strong? We're rating them all, and I honestly had no idea this adorable little guy had a base 80 attack. Its other stats are pretty meh though, so if you couple that with its also pretty meh move pool, on top of the fact that you can't even really use it until pushing the end game most of the time anyway, and I don't know how this isn't like a 1.5 in battle prowess. And like I said, it isn't very available either, other than in Crystal, where it's actually available before the first gym apparently. I'll admit I did not know that, but other than that, you can't get it until super late in most regions, and it's even a version exclusive in some of them. Crystal really is the only reason its battle prowess and availability aren't like ones. 2.5 stars. Teddiursa's whole concept is really just a huge play on words. Its name is literally just teddy bear, but it clearly takes pretty heavy inspiration from the whole moon, celestial body, and constellations like Ursa Minor. So it may be a simple or even obvious concept, but it is super cohesive and fitting. It's good. 3 stars. Its design then takes the teddy bear idea pretty literally, even to the point of the black button eyes. I do like the crescent moon on its forehead and the nervous paw licking. That's pretty adorable. It's obviously a very cute Pokemon, and it's actually my favorite in its line, but that's about all it has going for it. 3.5 stars. So that gives Teddiursa the final score of 2.625 stars, and thankfully the little guy narrowly avoids the bottom 5. Ursaring is such an unassuming Pokemon, but it is shockingly strong. We're rating them all, and it has 130 attack. Has it always been this strong? It is slow and has some bulk, but it has guts? I think I've been sleeping on Ursaring this whole time. It was even good back in Gen 2 with just Slash, Earthquake, and physical Hyper Beams. Even the special elemental punches and feint attack are worth mentioning with its serviceable special attack. And as the generations go on, it stays more or less the same actually, other than adding some pretty amazing TMs for setup on top of some awesome coverage moves. I'm going with 4 stars here, but I could absolutely see 4.5. It'll keep the same availability as Teddiursa at 2.5 stars, and its concept is pretty plainly laid out by its Japanese name being literally Ring of the Moon Bear. As we explained to Teddiursa, there's also the connection with the Ursa Minor and Major constellations. It's simple but nice. 3 stars. As for its design, however, I mean, this is literally just a bear. At least Teddiursa was kind of a teddy bear. It doesn't look bad by any means, but it just isn't big and bad enough to be a cool, fully evolved bear, hence the future evolution, and clearly isn't nearly as cute as the first stage. I like Ursaring a lot. It has a soft spot for me, but we have to be honest here, it's pretty uninspired. 2.5 stars. So that ends up giving Ursaring the final score of 3 stars overall. Wait, so is Slugma a Kanto or Hoenn Pokemon? Because you can't find it in Johto at all. We're rating them all, and I'm joking of course, but Slugma is just so bad. Like, oh, 70 special attack is pretty good. Yeah, sure, maybe, but with its 20 speed and 40s everywhere else, this thing isn't even gonna survive long enough to do anything. At least in Hoenn, where you can use it, you're just gonna be rocking with Ember and Rock Throw until right before it evolves. Sure, in later gens it gets Recover and Flame Burst, but like we said, with those stats, who cares? 1 star in battle prowess. And as for its aforementioned availability, it's also awful. Being a post-game encounter in your home region, disgraceful. But you can actually get it fairly early in both Hoenn and Kalos, so that'll save its availability and average it out to 2.5 stars. Slugma's concept is super straightforward, but honestly good. It's a slug made of lava. Similar to the Teddiursa line and the moon, it's a pretty easy line to draw, but that's not a bad thing by any means. 3 stars. And its design is fine. It's not bad. I'm glad they fixed its eyes post-Gen 2, but still. I kinda like it for some reason. Slugs are slow-moving little blobs, and I know not always, but stay with me here, so is lava. It's not fancy or cute or even cool, but it works. 2.5 stars. But that's not enough to save it from its final score being 2.25 stars, landing it a spot in the bottom 5. Ah, there goes it actually being 5 Pokemon, oh well. The Magma Snail, Magcargo, is up next as we rate them all, and I always wished it was better. Its defenses and special attack are good, but with 30 speed and common weaknesses, 2 of which being quad weaknesses, really keep Magcargo from ever really having a chance. Its move pool is actually really good too, with strong stab, fire, and rock moves, some utility in setup with Yawn, Amnesia, and Recover, and it also gets some awesome TM coverage. Magcargo looks really good on paper and has so much potential, but that's just never how it ends up going for it. 2.5 stars in battle prowess at best. And we haven't had one of these in quite a while, but I think the fact that you have to drag your useless little Slugma all the way to level 38 deserves a slight knock in availability from 2.5 to 2 stars. Its concept though, as we went over with Slugma, is simple and somewhat obvious as a magma snail with a rock shell. It's good, 3 stars. And as for its design, I might be alone on this one, but I actually really like it. It obviously isn't super cool or cute or intimidating or any of the normal traits people enjoy, but it's just a simple yet effective design. It's just a happy little magma snail with the hardened rock shell. I think it's really underrated, 3.5 stars. But even with that, Magcargo's final score is a pretty bad 2.75 stars. Swinub is so simple yet so cute. We're rating them all, and sadly in battle that isn't gonna help it. I actually really like its ground and ice typing. It's really nice offensively, but pretty brutal defensively. Its move pool is actually pretty decent with Icy Wind and Mud Bomb, or at least it would be if Swinub didn't have 30 special attack, and not really any other stats even worth mentioning. Remember, we're judging it on when you would realistically use it in a playthrough, which is endgame everywhere but Galar. And in that case, Swinub is borderline unusable. 1 star in battle prowess. And as I just said, it's usually a late game encounter, like in Johto, Sinnoh, and Kalos. Luckily for Swinub, it is available before the first gym in Galar, so that'll save its average and give it a shockingly high 3 stars in availability. Swinub is basically the baby of a mix of a wild boar and some woolly Ice Age mammals, which is a nice idea for a ground and ice type, but nothing special, 2.5 stars. And its design is very simple and minimalistic. It's just a furry little blob with a pig nose, yet they somehow managed to make it cute, which is enough to save it from an awful score, but it's a pretty middle of the road Pokemon design, 2.5 stars. So that sadly gives cute little Swinub 2.25 stars overall in the spot on the Johto bottom 5. Is it Piloswine or Piloswine? I don't know, but either way, we're rating them all, and how do you even judge this thing in battle? Its 100s in both HP and attack are nice, and so is its 80 in defense, but its low speed and special defense are made even more apparent since ice and ground is such a bad defensive type. Granted, I don't think I've ever actually used a Piloswine. I always evolve it into Mammo immediately, and before that was an option in Gen 2, holy crap, its move pool is awful. It obviously gets much better in later gens, but once again, you'll probably just evolve it. If you don't though, it's pretty good. With Earthquake, Ice Shard, and Ice Fang, take this one with a grain of salt, it's very confusing, 3 stars. Its availability will stay the same as Swinub at 3 stars, and its concept is also pretty much just the same as a mix of wild boar and prehistoric woolly mammals, but just more grown, 2.5 stars. And Piloswine has never done anything for me at all in terms of design. It's pretty boring, but to be fair, it does work. It's a woolly Ice Age little pig that now has little tusks, but really it's just kind of a blob of fur. Whether it works or not, it's not a very wow design, 2 stars, which gives Piloswine the final score of 2.625 stars, narrowly avoiding the bottom 5. Corsola was always a super forgettable Pokemon until its incredible regional form was introduced, but we're rating them all, and Corsola is pretty meh. Its water rock typing is okay, and its offensive stats are awful, coupled with its okay defensive stats. Why would you ever actually use this thing in Gen 2? But in later gens, it at least gets some pretty good moves actually, along with a lot of really good TMs for both support and for offense, but even with that, it's borderline below average, 2.5 stars. But you can actually get it surprisingly early with the Good Rod in Johto and Alola, but then super late in Hoenn and Unova, so that gives it a decent 3 stars in availability. And Corsola is quite obviously based off of Coral, which is a pretty cool idea for a water type and makes perfect sense with its secondary rock typing. But it's not all that interesting or exciting, unlike its Galarian form, which holy crap, it's a 5-star concept. But alas, Corsola gets 2.5 stars. Its design, however, while it's super simple, it's also super endearing and adorable. The light color scheme with the cute little face and the tiny little coral arms, but even with its cuteness and you guys claiming that I hate all cute pink Pokemon, I think Corsola actually has a pretty good design, 3.5 stars. But that still gives Corsola the final score of 2.875 stars overall. Man, Johto's Dex is rough. Remoraid holds the crown for the most nonsensical evolution to date. We're rating them all, and I'll admit that I've never used this thing, but its stats would initially make you think that it's some fast sweeper. But in reality, 65 isn't fast enough or strong enough for that, and its defenses are obviously garbage. Its move pool is pretty good though, so especially in the games where you can get it fairly early, plus its early-ish evolution, it's decent, 3 stars. But as I just hinted at, it isn't always early. In fact, it's yet another mid-Johto Pokemon that you can't find until super late in Johto. But then it's available available surprisingly early in most other generations, which gives it a pretty good 3.5 stars in availability. But its concept, I know you guys are waiting for it, it's literally just a fish. I'm just kidding. It's actually pretty heavily inspired by revolvers, which is a really cool take on an archer fish along with its connection with Mantike and Mantine, similar to the Remora fish. And that makes for a really awesome concept for a filler water type, 4 stars. Its design though really drops the ball on such an awesome idea. Sure, it vaguely resembles a revolver with the fins being the handle and hammer, the front spike thing being the iron sights, and the little fins being the trigger, but it's not nearly as good as it could have been, especially when you see the original artwork. It's now just a pretty normal looking real life fish. So disappointing. 2 stars. So that gives Remoraid the final score of 3.125 stars, shockingly high for it, honestly. Octillery evolving from Remoraid used to actually make sense. We're rating them all and we'll get to that, but in battle Octillery is interesting. It loses speed from Remoraid and now has nice attack stats, but with okay defense. Its sniper ability is a lot of fun and pretty awesome, and its move pool even back in Gen 2 was fine with Surf, Ice Beam, and Psybeam. Then its level up moves in later gens don't change too drastically, but boy does it get some awesome and hard hitting TMs with lots of coverage. I love Octillery for no good reason. It can be pretty good, but never amazing. 3.5 stars. Its availability will stay the same as Remoraid at 3.5 stars, and its concept is similarly incredible. A revolver fish evolving into a tank, artillery, or cannon octopus, so ridiculous, hilarious, and awesome for a game like Pokemon. 4 stars. But its design, similarly to Remoraid, could have been so much better. As I said at the start, this nonsensical evolution used to actually make sense. When you look at their designs from the 97 demo, they were much more heavily designed as firearms, making the anatomical change much more palatable. But now, I mean, this is just a literal octopus with a jet mouth. Granted, that octopus looks really cool, but come on. It's always been one of those Pokemon for me that I love for no reason at all. It isn't very good, and its design leaves a lot to be desired. 3 stars, which ends up giving Octillery a decent 3.5 stars overall. Calling Delibird a gimmick Pokemon doesn't quite do it justice. It's much worse. We're rating them all, and in battle, what are we even doing here? Awful stats across the board, its only level up move being the super random and sometimes detrimental Present, and in Gen 2 it can't even learn Ice Beam. Thankfully they fixed that in the later gens and gave it some actual decent TMs, which with those stats as a late game encounter is the only reason this thing is saved from like a half a star in battle prowess. 1 star. And as for availability, not only is it not available until after the 7th gym in Johto, but it's also a version exclusive. It's also super late in Unova and Kalos, but then ridiculously early in both Alola and Galar, so that'll bring its average up to 3 stars. And Delibird is obviously a Santa Claus penguin, which is incredibly random and hilarious, but I think it's actually a pretty original and interesting idea. 4 stars. Then its design just delivers. I'm sorry, I had to. But really though, it looks good. I like the contrasting colors and happy smile, but with the darker eyes and the bag it's carrying around, you could even say it's less of a Santa penguin and more of a shady penguin. Okay, I'm done. But I think its design is actually pretty good and endearing at the end of the day. 4 stars. So that gifts Delibird yet another 3-star Johto final score. Hey, pretend this is a catchy intro about Mantine. We're rating them all, and it's actually kind of good in battle. Water Flying is famously a good typing, then 140 special defense and otherwise respectable speed, bulk, and special attack. It gets the typical mid-Gen 2 move pool, but in later games it's actually kind of awesome, with plenty of strong attacks, some support, and recovery, not to mention all of the awesome TMs that it can get. Sure, it's not gonna hit too hard, but with all of that in mind, plus both of its really useful abilities, I think that it's at least 3.5 stars in battle prowess, but I could honestly see a 4. But its availability is all over the place. It's generally available around the mid to late game in most regions, but in the regions where you have to evolve it from a Mantike by having a whole different Pokemon in your party, I'm gonna give that a half a star penalty. So after all of the math, it ends up averaging out to 2.5 stars. And Mantine is quite literally just a manta ray, maybe with some loose inspiration from old school fighter planes, with Remoraid being the mounted weapons, but I think that's a stretch. 2 stars. But I do like its design, I always have for whatever reason. It's pretty much just an actual cartoon ray. It's not very exciting or interesting, it really doesn't stand out at all, but it's fine. 2.5 stars, which lands Mantine the final score of 2.625 stars, and are we in Hoenn yet? Skarmory is definitely a Johto fan favorite, when they remember it's from Johto at least. We're rating them all, and its typing alone makes it awesome. Steel Flying is incredible defensively with 8 resistances and as many immunities as it has weaknesses. Now Skarmory's stats are just pretty good. Obviously its defense is awesome, but it's just okay otherwise. Sturdy is a really handy ability to have post Gen 5, and you guys know the drill about Gen 2 movesets, but later on it's pretty awesome, with setup and support moves like Spikes, Agility, Sword Stance, and Roost. It has respectable offense as well with decent coverage. 4 stars. but it is pretty famously unavailable, at least in Johto, where you can't get it until right before the 8th gym and as a version exclusive. But then it's available before the 4th gym in Hoenn, back to endgame in Kalos, and mid-game in Alola. So it does just barely squeak out 2.5 stars. Skarmory is then based on a crane coated in armor made of swords, which is so cool, but it also has some mythological references and a nice pun in Japanese, 5 stars. And its design, god, it looked cool in Gens 2 through 5. It looked sleek and dangerous with its dynamic poses coming off as a threatening hunter. But then 3D, look what they did to our boy, they turned him into a balloon at a parade. But all jokes and 3 massacres aside, Skarmory's design is incredible and deserves 5 stars regardless, which gives Skarmory the final score of 4.125 stars and oh, just short of the Johto top 5. The next episode of Johto Pokemon you can't even find in Johto. We're rating them all, and hey, at least in battle, Houndour is pretty awesome. In the games where you can use it early, its 80 special attack and 65 speed are really gonna shine. Its only real downside is its move pool. Even in the newer generations, you're gonna be stuck using just Bite and Ember until it evolves, but thankfully that's a pretty early level 24, so that'll get a solid 3.5 stars in battle prowess. And as I said, you can't get it in Johto at all, but it is available fairly early in Platinum, X, and by breeding a Houndoom in Ultra Sun. And that's it. Okay, other than BDSP Underground and Paldea, which we're not counting, but it still manages to average out 2.5 stars. And Houndour is pretty much directly based off of Hellhounds, but to be fair, that's an awesome idea for a Pokemon and perfect for the Dark Fire type, 5 stars. Then its design does an incredible job portraying that. The skull crest on its head, along with the bone and shackle elements, really push home the fact that this guy means business and works for a guy that you don't want to meet, while simultaneously just being a cute puppy, a tough and scary cute puppy, but still, incredible first stage Hellhound design, 5 stars. So that gives Houndour a very respectable 4 stars overall. Houndoom is one of those Pokemon I never used to like, but has really grown on me. We're rating them all, and in battle, it's a blast to use. Dark and Fire is an awesome type combo, and Houndoom's stats with 110 in special attack and 90s in attack and speed make for an awesome mixed attacker, which is perfect for its move pool consisting of Flamethrower, Crunch, Nasty Plot, Dark Pulse, and some nice coverage and support. I was thinking its low defenses would hold it back a bit, but the fact that you can get this monstrosity at level 24, where it's gonna just devour everything and will still be really good in the end game, will get it that 5 stars. And as I just said, getting this strong of a Pokemon at this low of a level, usually not long after you get Houndour, also deserves a slight bump in availability to 3 stars. Its concept is pretty much the same though, a pretty literal iteration of a Hellhound, which is awesome, 5 stars. Now its design, as I mentioned, I was never really a fan of, but I'm honestly not sure why. The more that I look at it and pay attention, this thing is so cool. It keeps and adds on to the skull, bone, and shackle elements from Houndour, which do an incredible job of portraying Hellhound. But now it also just has straight up devil horns and tail. Kinda shocked they were allowed to do this one, honestly, but 5 stars. Which lands Houndoom the final score of 4.5 stars and our first addition to the top 5 in a while. We're rating them all. Mega Houndoom is intense, and in battle, it's no different. Houndoom got 5 stars for being an early and fast mixed attacker with awesome offenses and some support, and Mega Houndoom, well, is obviously better. With 140 special attack and great speed, and actually patching up Houndoom's defense, which was its biggest flaw, it would be pretty silly to also not give this 5 stars. But its availability just makes 0 sense. Its Megastone is locked behind the postgame in both Kalos and Hoenn, but Houndoom isn't even in Hoenn, and in Kalos, Houndoom is an X exclusive, but its Megastone is a Y exclusive. I just don't understand what the point of that could possibly be. We rate Mega's availability compared to other Megas, but even in that case, this is awful. 1 star. And Mega Houndoom, just like its Prevos, is clearly based on a Hellhound, but now Mega evolved and heated to the point of its claws and tail melting, and its breath turning its opponents to ash. I mean, wow, that's intense, but 5 stars. And its design also just really stretches the limits of Pokemon. Houndoom already had some devil inspiration, but its Mega just takes those and amplifies them. The devil horns and tail are now bigger and scarier, and adding on the whole massive demonic skull-looking chest and shoulder armor. No one can deny how bad this thing looks and how well it portrays a Hellhound, but I could see the argument that it's too much. That is kind of the point of Megas though, 5 stars. So that ends up giving Mega Houndoom an even 4 stars overall, missing out on the Mega top 5. Kingdra really is the epitome of a Johto Pokemon. We're rating them all, and Kingdra is so amazing, but honestly kind of in spite of its weird stat line. Sure, 95 across the board is good, but it's not amazing. Its real success comes from its incredibly defensive Water and Dragon typing, along with a diverse and effective move pool. Even early on, you've got moves like Surf, Ice Beam, Draco Meteor, or Dragon Pulse, and in later generations you can even run it physically with Dragon Dance, Waterfall, Flip, Turn, and Breaking Swipe. Oh, and 3 times damage crits with Sniper. Kingdra gets a pretty easy 5 stars in battle prowess. Its main issue is availability. It starts at Seadra's 3 stars, but if you take Kanto out of the consideration along with the trait evolution penalty, it's actually down to 2 stars. Then Horsea and Seadra both got a pretty bad concept score just for being actual seahorses. But Kingdra, as evident by its new dragon typing, improves on that. It's derived from the myth of a seahorse that lives for a century and transforms into a dragon, while also taking inspiration from, well, actual sea dragons, along with a whirlpool-causing Japanese deity, so that definitely deserves a sizable bump up to 4 stars. And I've always loved Kingdra's design. It's the perfect conclusion to its evolution line. It somehow manages to make a seahorse threatening, which is impressive in and of itself. It's sleek, majestic, fits its line, honestly pretty peak Pokemon design, 5 stars, which gives Kingdra the final score of 4 stars overall, just missing the top 5. Phanpy is the most underappreciated Johto Pokemon. It's so cute. We're rating them all, but sadly it's not good in battle. Sure, 90 HP and 60s in attack and defense are pretty good for a first stage, but its special defense and speed are just awful, especially if you look at when you'd be using it in the late game. Its only saving grace is being available super early in Crystal, but even that isn't great when you look at its truly atrocious move pool. And that doesn't even really get that much better in the later games, 1.5 stars. And its availability, other than Crystal, isn't much better. It's a super late game version exclusive in Silver, not as bad in Hoenn, and that's actually it. So Crystal saves yet another average and gives it 3 stars. Its concept though, oh I'm sorry Phanpy, but you're just a baby elephant. I hate to do it to you, but that's a 1-star concept. Okay, this obviously hasn't sounded very underappreciated so far, but in design it absolutely is. It's actually my personal favorite of the stereotypically cute Pokemon. Its little snout and legs and ears and stumpy little body, I mean come on, this thing is outrageously adorable. I want to give it 5 stars, but I don't think it's quite in that upper echelon, 4.5 stars, which gives Phanpy the final score of 2.375 stars and a spot in our Johto bottom 5. I'm so sorry little buddy. Donphan is a super unique and awesome Pokemon. We're rating them all, and I do wish it was a bit better in battle. Not to say it's bad, its 120 in attack and defense are awesome, but its special defense and speed really hold it back. Its only level up move even worth mentioning is Earthquake, and I guess the Elemental Fangs with the move reminder. But it does get some pretty good TMs for setup, support, and coverage. As long as you're smart about matchups, it can be really good, 4 stars in battle prowess. Its availability will stay the same as Phanpy's 3 stars, but its concept really improves on it, now being a dwarf elephant with tire-like armor that it uses for defense and famously for rolling around like a wrecking ball, which is just a really unique and creative idea, 4 stars. Its design then just nails it, going from cute little Phanpy to the formidable, brave, armored Donphan with the big sharp tusks and dark colored armor, while keeping just enough of Phanpy's cute with the same endearing stumpy little body. Incredible design, 5 stars. So that gives Donphan one of the biggest jumps yet, all the way up to 4 stars overall. Oh, and just a heads up for you guys, I am going on vacation next week, but I'm trying to get enough videos made ahead of time so I can still post on a somewhat regular schedule. Porygon 2 is up next as we rate them all, and in battle it's definitely an upgrade from Porygon, who got 2.5 stars in battle prowess. Upon evolution it gains 20 to every single one of its base stats, and that alone really patches up the main downsides of Porygon. Both of them get some amazing level up moves like Signal Beam, Discharge, Tri-Attack, Agility, Recover, and some absolutely amazing TMs. The difference is Porygon 2 can actually make really good use of them and be a very solid member of your team, 4 stars. Porygon did have a shockingly high 4 stars in availability, but with Porygon 2 being a trait evolution, that'll drop it down to 3 stars. And its concept is incredible. Going from the actual joke Game Freak played by purposely making this polygonal program Pokemon to the upgraded, more efficient Porygon 2 is easily a 5-star concept, but I don't think its design is quite as appealing. It's still really awesome though, don't get me wrong. It looks exactly as it should, a smoother and better programmed Porygon. It once again draws that perfect line between simplicity and abstract complexity. Whether I like it as much or not, it's still an awesome design, 4 stars, which ends up giving Porygon 2 an even 4 stars overall. Stantler had so much wasted potential. I'm glad it finally got an evolution. We're rating them all, and in most games, Stantler does not evolve and is a pretty mediocre single stage Pokemon. It does get Intimidate, which is arguably the best ability in the game, but its stats are okay at best. Decent attacks and speed, but poor defenses. is. And I know I've beat this point into the ground, but holy cow, bad Gen 2 move pool. But it does get improved in Gen 4 and gets some pretty amazing TMs all the way in Gen 9. But most of the time, it's kinda bad. 2.5 stars in battle prowess. Thankfully, unlike most Johto Pokemon, it's actually available before the 4th gym in Johto, but shockingly, that's the only place it's available before the postgame, not including Pokeradar or Paldea's open world. So it feels bad, but that's 4 stars. Stantler's concept is so cool, yet so disappointing. It's a deer, clearly, but it has reality warping powers. How is this thing not a psychic type? Either way, the reality warping thing alone gives it 3 stars. And I've always liked its design for some reason. I guess I just like deer Pokemon, but to be fair, it's a pretty literal cartoon deer other than its mystical antlers. It's not exactly interesting or appealing. It's fine. 2.5 stars. So that ends up giving Stantler the final score of 3 stars overall. I didn't realize how many gimmick Pokemon Johto had. Smeargle's up next as we rate them all, and its gimmick is obviously Sketch, which permanently copies the last move your opponent used. So sure, it has the potential to be amazing, as we've seen with its competitive performance, but in a playthrough, it's just not nearly as useful. Your opponent's moves are much less predictable and much less powerful. So you couple that with the fact that Smeargle's stats are just appalling, and come on, this thing isn't gonna do much of anything before it gets knocked out. 1 star. Its availability is better than I thought though, with it being available before the 4th gym in Johto, before the 2nd in Kalos, and the 1st in Alola, so that averages out to 4.5 stars. And Smeargle is obviously a beagle-like dog with heavy French painter inspiration, which is definitely unique, but not all that interesting. 3 stars. And pretty much the same can be said for its design. It's definitely unique and ties it all together, almost seemingly being designed entirely for the purpose of its gimmick. And to be fair, it does that well with its paintbrush tail and little artist beret, but other than that, it's honestly kind of boring and ugly. I've never been a fan of it at all. 2.5 stars, which draws Smeargle a final score of 2.75 stars, availability saving yet another from the bottom 5. Tyrogue was actually kind of a big deal. Not only was it the first, but still only Pokemon whose evolution is determined by stats, and is also the only Pokemon that's introduction connected to previously disconnected Pokemon. We're rating them all, and regardless of that, Tyrogue is still pretty bad. Granted, you only have to use it until level 20, and its Guts ability is normally amazing, but with 35 attack and everything else, it just isn't gonna matter. It doesn't even learn any moves until it evolves. Sure, Fake Out is great, but that's all you've got. 0.5 stars in battle prowess. And as for availability, you can't get it until after the 7th gym in Johto, not including that random egg, but before the 1st in Galar, and that's actually it, which managed to squeak it out to 4 stars. The concept of Tyrogue is a tricky one, because if you look at it as a standalone Pokemon, it's just a creepy little humanoid juvenile wrestler thing. But in relation to its evolution and the method that it gets there, having a determined little martial artist whose training path decides who it becomes is really cool. I like it. 3.5 stars. Its design though, my goodness, this is rough. Once again, looking at it as just its own Pokemon, it just doesn't look good. I don't like its weird poofy pants and its odd human adjacent skin tone. It's just an extremely unappealing design. Humanoid Pokemon who wear clothes is a very thin line to look good. But then you could also argue that it looks absolutely nothing like any of its evolutions. I don't think it works as any of their Prevos at all. I think it's actually one of the worst designs in Johto, if we're being honest. That's 0.5 stars. So that lands Tyrogue 2.125 stars overall and a spot on the Johto bottom 5. Tyrogue had a rough go of it here on Rate 'em All, so let's see if Hitmontop has a better time. In battle, it's probably the best of the Hitmon trio. Its stats are awesome with 95 in attack and defense, 110 in special defense, and decent speed. Then both of its abilities are just amazing. You really can't go wrong there. Its signature move, Rolling Kick, is nice early on with a 30% chance of flinch, and later on, Triple Kick is also pretty cool. Then with moves like Fake Out, Sucker Punch, Close Combat, Bulldoze, it may not be as diverse as Chan and not as one-hit wonder as Lee, but it's just really solid. 4 stars in battle prowess. Its availability will be the same as Tyrogue at 4 stars, but its concept is definitely better. Mixing the ideas of spinning top toys and capoeira martial arts is such an awesome and creative idea for a fighting type Pokemon, and it needing equal stats to evolve to help keep its equilibrium when being inverted and spinning is just the cherry on top. 5 stars. And its design is definitely unique. As I made pretty clear in the Tyrogue video, it and none of the other Hitmons make any sense at all design-wise as an evolution of Tyrogue. It has nothing at all in common with it, but on its own it does look pretty good. I like the spinning top head spike and the weird like almost spiked wrecking ball feet and tail. I don't know, it's a super goofy and all over the place design, but it somehow ends up kinda working. It is a crime that they made the 3D model not spin though. 3.5 stars. So that'll end up giving Hitmontop 4.125 stars overall, just missing out on the top 5. I know Smoochum only exists because the other two in its trio also got baby Pokemon, but just why? We're rating them all, and in battle it's actually kind of usable for a baby Pokemon. It Its 85 in special attack and 65 in special defense and speed are great, but yeah, you're probably going down to 1 quick attack with 15 defense. Ice and Psychic are amazing offensively, but pretty horrible defensively, just like Smoochum. Its moves are actually pretty decent, but you really shouldn't send this thing into battle until it evolves. 2 stars. But if you don't count the 1 in 7 chance of getting this from an egg, the only way you can get it in Johto is by breeding a Jinx. And oh my god, I wish I did not have to say that sentence. It is similarly unavailable until after the 6th gym in Kalos, but you can actually get it on the first island in Alola, which saves it and gives it 3 stars in availability. Its concept stems from the Gyaru fashion trend in Japan that Jinx was pretty heavily based off of, but an even more niche subsect of that called Gyaru Mama, basically the same thing but for babies. And it loses any semblance of the one redeeming quality of Jinx, of it being like a spirit mountain hag thing. Now it's just a creepy dressed up baby thing. 1 star. And its design at least tones back the clearly offensive aspects of Jinx that stirred controversy, but now it more closely resembles a baby bird, which sure, it looks better, but it's still just super weird and not appealing, while also not really even looking remotely like Jinx anymore. But at least it'll do better than Jinx's 0 stars, 1 star. So that lands Smoochum 1.75 stars overall, which I think is the lowest we've ever had, and of course it's in the bottom 5. Elekid is a perfect example of a baby Pokemon done right. We're rating them all, and it's definitely usable in battle, with 95 speed and 60-ish in both attacks, but a sad 37 in defense. As long as you mind your matchups, it can be pretty good. It has a pretty awesome move pool actually, with Low Kick, Shockwave, Electro Ball, and some support with Thunder Wave and Light Screen. Its late evolution level holds it back though for sure. Having to stick with those stats until level 30 is pretty painful. 2.5 stars. It's so funny to me that so many of these baby Pokemon just aren't available in Johto at all, other than that one random odds egg and crystal, which I haven't counted yet so far, but since that's the only way you can get it before the post game, I think I'll just ignore Johto as a whole for its availability this time. And other than that, it's actually only available in Unova as a super early version exclusive and in the mid game in Alola, so that does give it a nice 4 stars. Electabuzz got 5 stars in concept for being based off of Oni, which are ogre-like creatures with some electrical powers, and more specifically the Japanese god of lightning, Raijin. And Elekid is just a baby Raijin that spins its arms to generate electricity and charge up, another easy 5 stars. And its design I think is just amazing. Electabuzz is arguably my favorite electric type, and Elekid just takes most of those good things from it and shrinks it down into a baby and gives it a hilarious power plug head. This is another one of those like Fanpea that I absolutely love, but I don't think are quite in that upper echelon. 4.5 stars. So that generates Elekid a shocking 4 stars overall. Is Magby the best baby Pokemon? We're rating them all, and in battle it might just be. Its stats are actually really respectable. Of course it has the bad baby Pokemon defenses, but with enough speed and offensive stats to kind of get around that. You do still have to use it until level 30, which sucks, but you do get it fairly early and it can put in honestly quite a bit of work in the meantime. Its move pool isn't anything special, pretty typical fire type attacks with a few support moves, so I think 3 stars is fair. It's also just more available than most babies. You can technically catch and breed a Magmar before the 4th gym in Johto, but then not until after the 6th in Platinum, but then you can just straight up catch it super early in both Unova and Alola, so that averages out to 4 stars in availability. Magmar also got 5 stars in concept for being a mashup of ducks, mythical salamanders of fire, and quite a few mythological and historical references. And Magby is just a baby Magmar. It has the same story, 5 stars. But where Magmar got 4 stars in design, I don't think Magby's is quite as good. Granted, I'm glad they retconned the booby forehead, but otherwise it's just kind of a weird looking little bird dino with a choker. It's pretty meh if we're being honest, but it's not bad and it works as a baby Magmar. 3 stars. So that gives Magby the final score of 3.75 stars overall. The scourge of Johto herself, Miltank, is up next as we rate them all. I know the talking point of Whitney's tough gym battle is milked dry at this point, so we all know how strong this cow can be. But we can take a step back and realize it's because its stats are just utterly ridiculous for that early in the game, coupled with its combination of moves and mechanics that we all know too well. Stomp flinches, infatuation, rollout decimation, and milk drink recovery. Its bulk and utility do translate well into the late game, but its attack does become much more average. Both of its abilities are also really useful, and why does every single normal type get like every TM in the game? Why can this cow shoot ice beams and thunderbolts? I know we were all scarred by this thing as children, but I think about 4 stars in battle prowess is fair. And it's also way more available than you'd think. It's before the 4th gym in Johto and Kalos, and pretty much immediately on the 2nd island in Alola, so that averages out to 4 stars. And as for its concept, I mean, this is a literal dairy cow, which it has been a while, but we do give a slight boost to normal type Pokemon who are normal animals, since that's kind of the point. 2 stars. Its design is pretty endearing though, which is impressive for it just being a literal animal. They managed to make its face really cute, but god, did they really have to give this thing jiggle physics and 3D sprites? I honestly don't have too much to say about Miltank's design. It's fine. 3 stars. So that gives Miltank the final score of 3.25 stars overall. Pokemon like Blissey really kind of break the system here as we rate them all. And Blissey Blissey, I mean, is an instant win button on any special attacker. It will not lose. But it's also pretty much entirely useless against any physical attacker. It will get taken out very easily. It is invaluable in competitive or Nuzlocke playstyles, but in a normal playthrough, there's just no need for it. Sure, it absolutely can guarantee some wins for you, but most of the time it's riding the bench. I think 2.5 stars is fair. And as we went over in the Chansey video, it's also way more available than you'd think, 4 stars. And Chansey also got 5 stars in concept for being the pretty funny idea of an egg who gives out eggs that heal people, which is a fun spin on the stereotypical healer niche in RPGs. Every RPG needs one, but this one is super unique, 5 stars. But Blissey's design I don't think is quite as good. I think adding the angelic looking frilly skirt and shoulder things was a bit much. And I think that Chansey's axolotl ears looked a lot better than Blissey's curls? I don't know, don't get me wrong, Blissey is still good for most of the same reasons as Chansey, but I think that they tried to do a little bit too much with it, 3.5 stars, which lands Blissey the final score of 3.75 stars overall.
The legendary beasts might just be the best legendary trio. We're rating them all in Raikou, however you want to say it, is awesome. Obviously it's a legendary, so its stats are great, but as is the story with most Johto Pokemon, its move pool is not. It's bad in Gen 2, of course, but in Gen 4, it's not that much better. It doesn't get its first special electric move until level 57. Don't get me wrong, it's still awesome, and I know TMs are a thing, but I think 4.5 stars is more accurate for battle prowess until you remember how ridiculously early you can get it, where it's obviously just going to crush. So that does enough to get it the 5 stars. As for availability, remember we judge legends compared to other legends, but the whole roaming mechanic is a unique issue. I got lots of helpful comments on here, but we have to remember that on one hand, it is technically available insanely early for a legend, but on the other, it is very annoying to get. So between the polls and some of the input that I've gotten from you guys, I'm leaning on a half a star penalty for roaming, which does give Raikou 4.5 stars. I'm sure we all know its story, how it was a Pokemon stuck in the burned tower and resurrected by Ho-Oh, creating the legendary beast Raikou. But its design takes heavy inspiration from the thunder beast of Raijin, who is the Japanese god of lightning, which is an obvious and easy 5 stars. And its design is clearly not the fan favorite from its trio, but it has always been mine. With the Smilodon saber teeth, the unique take on tiger patterns, the thunder clouds on its back, and a lightning bolt tail, this is an absolutely incredible design that does not get nearly enough love, 5 stars, which gives Raikou the final score of 4.875 stars and the new #1 spot on our Legends Top 5. Entei definitely feels the most legendary out of its trio. We're rating them all, and in battle, it's once again awesome. Its stats are fantastic with high speed, attack, and HP. Its special attack is still good, but it being lower is really unfortunate considering in Gen 2, all of its good moves are special. And it can't even get Earthquake. It's kind of better in Gen 4, but not really, because you'll still probably do more with Flamethrower than you would Firefang. And they still don't give the Volcano Pokemon Earthquake. So similarly to Raikou, that makes it feel like not 5 stars in battle prowess, but once again, getting this thing around the 4th gym is just ridiculous, and it's gonna crush a playthrough, 5 stars. And its availability, similarly to Raikou, will get half a star penalty for the roaming shenanigans, but compared to other legends, the 4th gym is insane, so it'll get 4.5 stars. Its concept also has the same origin as the other legendary beasts, of course, and I doubt I'm the first person who's had this idea, but I love the theory of the 3 Pokemon who were trapped in the tower were the original evolutions, who were then resurrected and made into these legendary beasts of the same type trio. Now that doesn't matter here, but it is worth mentioning, 5 stars. I do think that Entei's design is the most cohesive of the 3. Even though it is just as complex as Raikou's, it just doesn't feel like it is. I love the multicolored facial crest, the billowing volcano smoke, the jagged rocks, even the super random shackle still just work somehow. Entei's design is fantastic. It looks like a legendary volcano lion dog. It nails it, 5 stars. Which gives Entei the final score of 4.875 stars, tying Raikou for the top spot in the Legends Top 5. Suicune is definitely the most unique box art legend, but can it match the others in its trio as we rate them all? In battle at least, it is of course similarly pretty great, this time with a more defensive stat spread, but 90 special attack is still plenty good enough to fire off Surfs and Ice Beams, especially since those are really the only good moves it's gonna get in a normal playthrough. However, unlike the other 2 legendary beasts, you won't get to use it nearly as early, so it loses that pretty important edge, and I think that 4.5 stars is more fair for battle prowess. Its availability, as I just mentioned, is also sadly just not as good. In 3 out of 5 Johto appearances, it's found much later than its counterparts. In Gold and Silver, it'll still get that 4.5 stars for roaming like the others, but in Crystal, it isn't available until right before the 8th gym. And in the remakes, it's even later, actually in the post-game. Thankfully, this is still compared to other legends, so that saves it and it averages out to 4 stars. But its concept, as we went over with the other beasts, is incredible. It's one of the Pokemon that Ho-Oh resurrects and represents the rains that put out the fires for the Burning Tower, as well as getting heavy inspiration from the Shinto god of the wind, which ties together with the leopard and the north wind ideas. 5 stars. And its design is probably my least favorite of the trio, but that's not saying much because all 3 of them are incredible. It is also the fan favorite, and Suicune is definitely the reason a lot of people incorrectly call them the legendary dogs because, well, it looks like one. But apparently it's supposed to be a leopard. But even so, who cares what animal it's exactly supposed to be? It's still an absolutely gorgeous design for a legendary Pokemon and really gives that feel of mystery. 5 stars. So that lands Suicune the final score of 4.625 stars overall and a spot on the Legends top 5. Larvitar is the perfect example of a great first stage pseudo-legend. But in battle, Larvitar is just awful for when you can use it. We're reading them all, and its bad rock ground typing has a lot of weaknesses, and its lackluster stats don't make up for it. Granted, you probably won't ever actually use this thing before it evolves, but if you do, it's just really bad. 1 star. And its availability is famously horrible. It isn't available in Johto not only until post-game, but until the very end of the longest post-game in the series. However, you can actually get it in the Safari Zone fairly early in the remakes, though it strangely doesn't show that on any of these typical websites, but otherwise its availability ranges pretty drastically in the rest of the games, but still averages out to 2 stars. Then Larvitar is pretty much just a baby kaiju with an appetite for mountains, which is fairly simple, but that's not a bad thing. It's really cool. 4 stars. And its design is also pretty simple, yet great. I actually had it at the top of my first stage pseudo ranking, and as I said at the start, it's the perfect example of a good one. With its cute chubby little body and stubby little arms and legs, but with the very serious and intimidating facial markings and expressions as a hint of what's to come. 5 stars. Which actually lands Larvitar 3 stars overall, the same final score as Dratini. Pupitar is definitely an interesting middle stage for a pseudo. We're rating them all, and in battle, it's the Pokemon in its line you'll actually end up using for the most time, which isn't a great thing. Its stats aren't horrible, 85 attack and pretty decent defenses, but considering you're stuck with those stats until level 55, which is more than likely during the Elite Four, that's rough. Its rock ground typing isn't doing it many favors either, but its moveset is actually pretty awesome. Rock Slide, Payback, Crunch, Earthquake, and some really good TMs including Brick Break, even though it doesn't have hands, but even with those, it's just not very good. 2 stars. Its availability, as we went over with Larvitar, is famously awful and ends up being 2 stars as well. Its concept is weird. It's obviously a pupa, which is an evolutionary stage of insects, but has always felt super out of place for this very clearly rock-like Godzilla kaiju monster. So as I said, it definitely feels like an odd choice, but it is a very unique and creative one, so it won't drop too far. 3 stars. Its design is, and always has been, clearly the odd one out in its line, and is just generally not that interesting. I have a lot of nostalgia for it because this was actually the first Pokemon I learned how to do the duplication glitch on, and sure, the eyes peering out from the darkness inside of its shell, continuing the "ooh, something's coming" idea is pretty good, but it's okay, it's not bad. 3 stars. Landing Pupitar the final score of 2.5 stars, and gives me the chance to finally show you guys that our beloved Vanpy is no longer in the bottom 5. Will Tyranitar make it onto the Johto top 5, unlike Dragonite, who missed the mark in Kanto? We're rating them all, and in battle, it's an absolute monster. With its pseudo-legendary stats giving it outrageous attack, honestly really solid special attack, and great bulk, especially when you consider its Sandstream ability, which increases its special defense by 50%. So those things really kind of mitigate the amount of weaknesses that it has, which to be fair, there are plenty. But its offenses are also amazing with Stab, Crunch, and Rock Slide, along with plenty of incredible TM options both for coverage and for setup, an easy 5 stars. Its availability, however, is its largest flaw. As we went over with Larvitar, it isn't available until very late in most regions, save Alola, but we also can't forget the fact that it doesn't evolve until level 55. Having to drag your deadweight Larvitar and Pupitar to that high of a level warrants half a star penalty, just like it did for Dragonite. 1.5 stars, which I think is actually the worst non-legendary availability yet. Its concept is basically just Godzilla, but as a rock dark type Pokemon. I really wish they would have stuck with this non-dragon or even monster-esque pseudo-legends, an awesome idea. 4 stars. And its design is just amazing. An imposing and menacing rock-like kaiju with the spikes and shadows hinting at its darker side. I actually had Titarin 3rd on my pseudo-legends list, but that might be low if we're being honest. It's such an iconic and amazing design. 5 stars. Which, oh boy, gives Tyranitar the final score of 3.875 stars overall, and here comes comes the get rid of availability comments. Mega Tyranitar is outrageous and ridiculous. We're rating them all and those things remain true for its battle prowess. I mean, T-Tar was already an absolute tank of a pseudo legend, but then you mega evolve it and give it these stats? This thing is just insanely strong. Who cares about its abundant weaknesses? Especially when you consider its ability making it even bulkier and its slew of offensive options. This is an obvious 5 stars. And its availability is also just completely ridiculous for the opposite reason. T-Tar already had a series low 1.5 stars for availability, but then you look at its Megastone, which you can't get until post-game in X as a version exclusive, but T-Tar is a Y exclusive. Then it's also post-game in Oras, which T-Tar isn't even in. This is at best a half a star for availability, and I could honestly see a 0. Its concept though I think might actually be an upgrade from the pretty plain kaiju inspiration from Tyranitar. Now taking the somewhat forgettable aspect of Tyranitar emerging from its pupa, Pupitar, and just blowing it up. Literally. Its back splits open from the power. This guy's really come out of his shell. 5 stars. Its design is once again kind of ridiculous. I do like the fact that it brings back features from Larvitar and Pupitar with the head spike, red belly, and eye patterns on its chest, but this is a good example of why concept and design are separate. The idea of it splitting open is awesome, but it just doesn't look good. It looks like an evil Christmas tree, and an outrageous one at that. Granted, it's still Tyranitar, so it's not going to drop too low, 3.5 stars, which gives Mega Tyranitar 3.5 stars overall, not even close to the Mega Top 5. Lugia is one of the more popular legendary Pokemon, so let's see how it does as we grade them all. As for battle prowess, its stats are obviously as massive as its hands, being a legendary with a mostly defensive spread. Its offenses though are fairly average. I've honestly always found it to be a bit underwhelming in a playthrough. In Gen 2, it's basically just a fly and surf machine, but has the survivability with recover. In the remakes, it at least gets extrasensory and aeroblast while gaining access to loads of incredible TMs, but it loses the very important recover for staying power. So like I said, in both gens, it ends up feeling underwhelming for different reasons. 4.5 stars. Remember, for legends, we compare their availability to other legends, but box art legends offer a unique challenge since when you get them is drastically different per version. So I think we'll just take the score from its version and just throw on the normal version exclusive penalty to make it more simple. So that ends up giving Lugia 3 stars. Its concept actually goes pretty deep, with the surface level being based on a mix of seabirds and wyverns, but something I'm just now learning is the duality between it and Ho-Oh, Lugia representing the dragon-like Shinto god of the sea, and Ho-Oh the Chinese phoenix, which I guess is connected to yin and yang. I don't really understand why, but either way, that's 5 stars. And its design, as I said at the start, is one of the more popular legends. It's really awesome and iconic. I personally love the minimalistic design here. It's simple and sleek, with a few details to really set it apart, like the dark blue spikes contrasting on the white. Even though it's somehow a psychic flying type, it does look like a legend who could rule the seas, especially with its weird, massive hand flipper wing things. But oh my god, they look so dumb. I can't get past those big, goofy, clunky hands. 4.5 stars, which lands Lugia the final score of 4.25 stars, and actually boots Mewtwo from the Legends Top 5. Ho-Oh is another one of those Pokemon I never cared for as a kid, but has really grown on me. We're rating them all, and in battle, it's actually really awesome. I like its stat spread much better than Lugia's, with great attacks and still really good bulk. With its fire and flying typing both offering some really nice stab moves, even in Gen 2 with Sacred Fire and Fly plus Recover. Then in Gen 4, they gave this atrocity Brave Bird and pretty much any TM you could want. This is clearly 5 stars. Its availability, as we explained with Lugia, will be compared to other legends and given the version exclusive penalty to simplify the version differences. 3 stars. And Ho-Oh's concept is pretty clearly a phoenix, but more specifically, the immortal phoenix from Chinese legend, which ties further into its duality with Lugia and its resurrection of the legendary beasts. 5 stars. Oh, and real quick, I do want to say that after we finish Johto, I will be taking another small break for the holidays, moving, and to finally do the Kanto recap video, but anyway, its design, as I mentioned at the start, never really did anything for me as a kid. It just looked like a big peacock. But now I can appreciate how regal and powerful it looks, even if it just kind of literally is a copy and paste from the ancient drawings of the Chinese immortal phoenix, which does kind of take away from it a little bit, but it still looks incredible and iconic. 4.5 stars, which gives Ho-Oh the final score of 4.375 stars, rising into the top 5 and putting out the inferior fire flying legend from the top 5. Celebi is one of my favorite Pokemon that I've never been able to use. We're rating them all, and in battle I'm kind of guessing here, but it looks pretty darn good. It has the same stats as Mew with 100s across the board, as well as sharing its psychic typing while adding on grass, which actually kind of hurts it, giving it loads of weaknesses. I'm still shocked they didn't change this thing into Grass Fairy after Gen 6. Crystal is the only game that it's in, and in Crystal its move pool is pretty awful actually. You're stuck with just Leech Seed, Confusion, and Recover cover. Now it does get a few nice TMs for sure, but as a whole it feels pretty underwhelming considering its mythical status. 4 stars. And I mean, I think we can cut availability short here, it's just literally not available anywhere. Even back when Crystal first released, Celebi was in a Japan exclusive event, and I can't find any way to get it in the remakes. This is 0 stars. I'm honestly considering removing availability, now calm down, just for mythicals, because most of them are just not available. Now it would give them weird numbered rankings compared to everyone else, but that kind of makes sense. Let me know what you think. And as for its concept, I can't really find what Celebi is based on. It seems to be a pretty original idea of a little plant bulb time-traveling fairy that heals forests, which is really cool, and god, I wish this thing was usable. 5 stars. And I just love its design. It's so simple yet so adorable, while also portraying its super rare and mythical nature. It looks like a mystical creature you only hear of in legend. I love the little antenna, the little fairy wings, and the big ol' alien-like eyes with the little plant bulb hairdo. Incredible shiny too. Celebi is an easy 5 stars in design, which gives it the final score of 3.5 stars overall, or it would end up 4.66 repeating without availability.